Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. So, I've been digging through some files from Oregon, and what I found kept me awake for 3 nights straight. 7 people. 7 different jobs. 7 confessions that should never have been written down. Here's the scary part. One of them was a teacher, just a regular substitute teacher covering a class. Another one delivered your mail. Think about that for a second. These aren't criminals or crazy people. They're the folks you see every day and never think twice about. But they all share one horrible secret. They all crossed a line they can never come back from. And the worst part? They're telling us they had no choice. That once you see what they saw, you either join in or you disappear. I don't know if I believe that, but after reading their stories, I understand why they said it. If this is your first time on Mr. Midnight, go ahead and subscribe. We dive into the darkest true stories out there, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Hit that notification bell too. Ready? Because what happens in Oregon doesn't stay in Oregon. Let's go. My name is Danny Martinez. Or it was. I don't know who I am anymore. I was an Oregon State Trooper for 8 years before everything went to hell. Highway patrol, night shift, covering that stretch of Highway 101 between Bandon and Gold Beach. 42 miles of coastal road where the Pacific Ocean crashes against cliffs on one side and dense forest swallows up everything on the other. People think being a cop is about catching bad guys and writing tickets. But out there, alone on the night shift, you become something else. You become the thin line between civilization and whatever's hiding in the dark. I thought I was protecting people. Turns out I was just feeding something that had been hungry for a very long time. Carmen always worried about me working nights. She'd pack extra coffee in my thermos and kiss me goodbye at 10 p.m., making me promise to be careful. The roads are slick, she'd say. People drive crazy in the fog. She was a nurse at Curry General, worked day shifts, so we'd pass each other like ships in the night. Her going to save lives, me going to, well, I thought I was doing the same thing. 8 years on Highway 101. I knew every curve, every blind spot, every place where kids liked to race, and where drunk drivers ended up in the ditch. My patrol car was a 2018 Ford Interceptor, loaded with all the standard equipment, dash cam, laptop, radar gun, emergency medical kit. The radio was my lifeline, crackling with updates from dispatch and other units scattered across 3 counties. But that radio couldn't reach where I was going. Highway 101 at night is a different world. Fog rolls in from the Pacific without warning, thick enough to turn your headlights useless. Cell towers are few and far between. Sometimes I'd drive for hours without seeing another car, just the rhythm of tires on wet asphalt and the distant sound of waves crashing 200 feet below. August 12, 2019. That's when it started. I was finishing a routine traffic stop around 1:30 a.m. when dispatch called. Unit 47. We've got a report of a damaged vehicle blocking southbound lanes at mile marker 267. No injuries reported, but the caller sounded confused. Unit 47 responding, I said, already knowing something was wrong. People don't sound confused about car accidents. They sound scared, or hurt, or angry. Confused is something else entirely. The drive to mile marker 267 gave me 15 minutes to think. Devil's Backbone Ridge, where the highway curves around a rocky outcrop that looks like a giant spine in daylight. At night, it's just darkness pressing in from both sides. I found the car easily enough. Red Honda Civic, sitting sideways across the southbound lane. But as soon as I stepped out of my patrol car and swept my flashlight across the scene, my training kicked in with warnings that didn't make sense. The Honda's roof had been peeled back like opening a can of soup. Not crushed from a rollover, not cut with the jaws of life. Peeled back in perfect strips, the metal curled away from the passenger compartment with surgical precision. No crash could do that. No tool I'd ever seen could cut steel that cleanly. Oregon State Police, I called out, hand resting on my service weapon. Anyone need assistance? Silence. Just the wind through the trees and the distant crash of waves. The driver's seat was empty, but blood covered everything. Dark stains on the upholstery, the dashboard, pooled in the floorboards. My flashlight beam caught a driver's license sitting on the passenger seat like someone had placed it there deliberately. Margaret Chen, 34, from Portland. The photo showed a smiling woman with kind eyes. I radioed it in. Dispatch, Unit 47. I have an abandoned vehicle with evidence of serious injury, but no victim on scene, requesting backup and medical. Copy, Unit 47. Due to staffing shortages, backup is approximately 25 minutes out. 25 minutes. I started searching the area around the Honda, looking for Margaret Chen or any sign of what happened to her. That's when my flashlight found the tracks. They weren't human. Too long, maybe 18 inches from heel to toe. Too narrow, with deep gouges at the front like claws had dug into the asphalt. The tracks led from the car toward the tree line in a straight path, as if whoever made them wasn't worried about being followed. I followed them to the edge of the forest, but the undergrowth was too thick to see far. My flashlight beam disappeared into darkness that seemed to swallow the light. Back at the Honda, I did a thorough search of the interior. No purse, no cell phone, no personal belongings, except that license. But in the back seat, scattered across the upholstery like someone had been organizing them, I found photographs. Professional quality prints, close-up shots of human faces from every angle. Men, women, children of various ages. Some appeared to be sleeping peacefully. Others had their eyes wide open in what might have been surprise or terror. Each photo was numbered in the corner with precise handwriting. Margaret Chen's driver's license photo had been cut out and placed in the sequence as number 847. When backup finally arrived, Officer Lisa Park, 2 years on the force and still eager to prove herself, she took one look at the Honda and let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Danny. What kind of accident does this?" "It wasn't an accident," I said, showing her the photographs. "Someone took Margaret Chen. And they've been taking people for a long time. We called in forensics and had the Honda towed to the state crime lab. I spent the rest of my shift writing reports and trying to make sense of tracks that shouldn't exist and photographs that suggested something far worse than a random highway crime." The next night, mile marker 271, 4 miles north of where we'd found Margaret Chen's car. This time it was a pickup truck, and the damage was even more precise. The entire roof had been removed in one piece, lifted away like the lid of a box. The driver, Rob Watson, according to his registration, was gone. More blood, more photographs, but this scene had something new. Surgical instruments scattered on the ground near the truck, scalpels, forceps, bone saws, all of them covered in fresh blood but wiped clean of fingerprints. The photographs weren't just in the vehicle this time. They were nailed to trees in a careful pattern around the scene. Dozens of them showing faces from every angle. Professional studio lighting, perfect composition. Someone was documenting their work. I called Sergeant Morrison directly. "Bill, we've got a serious problem. This isn't some highway robber or carjacker. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking someone is collecting people, and they're getting better at it." Over the next week, 3 more vehicles were found. Same surgical removal of the roof, same missing drivers, same carefully arranged photographs. The state crime lab found DNA from all 5 victims, but no usable prints from the perpetrator. Then Fish and Wildlife called with footage from their trail cameras. On August 20th, I sat in a conference room at district headquarters watching video that made my hands shake. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m., just 15 minutes before I'd found that night's victim. The creature on the screen was nearly 9 feet tall, with arms so long they almost touched the ground when it walked upright. Its movements were too fluid, too graceful for something that size, but it was the hands that made my breath catch. Where fingers should have been were surgical blades, each one about 8 inches long and sharp enough to part metal like fabric. The creature's face was the worst part. Raw, scarred flesh where features should have been, with hollow eye sockets that seemed to look directly into the camera. In the footage, it approached a stopped car with the methodical precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. It circled the vehicle twice, examining it from every angle, then placed its blade hands against the roof. The metal parted without resistance. What happened next took me 3 attempts to watch completely. The creature reached into the car and began operating on the conscious victim with careful, deliberate movements. The person was awake and struggling, but the creature held them steady with inhuman strength while it worked. When it finished, it lifted something away from the victim's face, something that had been part of them moments before, and examined it in the moonlight like an art critic studying a painting. Then it placed the object carefully in a leather pouch and walked back into the forest, leaving the victim alive but changed forever. We found Marcus Powell, the truck driver from that night's video, still breathing when paramedics arrived. His entire face had been removed with surgical precision. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just clean cuts and exposed bone that would have required years of medical training to execute. He died at the hospital 2 hours later, unable to speak or even scream. I started staying after my shifts, studying maps and crime scene photos, looking for patterns. All the attacks happened during heavy fog that rolled in from the Pacific. All occurred in areas where cell service was weakest and backup was farthest away. The creature was learning our procedures, adapting its methods to our response times. But there was something else. The surgical cuts were getting cleaner with each attack, the photographs more professional, and when I arranged them in chronological order, I could see the creature was comparing each collected face to something specific. On August 28th, following a clear set of those inhuman tracks, I hiked 2 miles into the coastal forest and found what I can only describe as a workshop. The cave behind the waterfall was hidden so well, I almost missed it. Inside, the smell hit me first: antiseptic, decay, and something else that made my sinuses burn. Industrial work lights had been strung from the ceiling, powered by a generator that hummed constantly in the depths of the cave. The walls were covered with hundreds of photographs, all arranged around a single yellowed newspaper clipping from October 15th, 1953. The headline read, "Local cannery worker disappears on Highway 101." The accompanying photo showed Elena Vasquez, 23, who had vanished while driving home from her late shift. But it was the opposite wall that made me understand. Faces. Dozens of human faces, preserved through some process I didn't want to think about and mounted in glass cases like butterfly collections. They were organized by features: eye shape in one section, nose structure in another, mouth variations in a third. Each case was labeled with precise measurements and notes written in multiple languages. In the center of the collection was a workbench covered with surgical instruments and something that had once been human features. Someone was reconstructing Elena Vasquez's face, piece by piece, using components harvested from different victims over decades of careful selection. A journal lay open beside the work area, filled with sketches and notes in that same precise handwriting from the photographs. The entries went back to 1954, 1 year after Elena's disappearance. Whoever was doing this had been perfecting their technique for 65 years. I radioed for backup and tactical support, but when our team returned the next day with full equipment, the cave was empty, cleaned out completely, as if it had never been used. Even the generator was gone. But the creature wasn't finished with me. September 2nd, 11:47 p.m. Carmen was driving home from her nursing shift at Curry General when her car's GPS tracker showed her stopped at mile marker 263. I was patrolling the northern section of my route, 20 minutes away. I broke every speed limit getting there. Her white Camry sat in the middle of the highway, roof peeled back, driver's seat empty. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't alone. I saw it hunched over something in the tree line, just beyond the reach of my headlights. When I stepped out of my patrol car, it turned toward me, and I got my first clear look at what 65 years of surgical practice had created. It was wearing Carmen's face. My wife's features had been grafted onto its skull with surgical thread so fine it was barely visible. Her brown eyes, the eyes that lit up when she laughed at my bad jokes, stared at me from those hollow sockets. When it spoke, it used her voice perfectly. "Danny," it said, pronouncing my name exactly the way Carmen did when she was tired after a difficult shift. "I've been waiting for you." My service weapon was in my hand, but I couldn't make myself aim properly. This thing was wearing my wife's face, speaking in her voice, and some part of my brain couldn't process the impossibility. The creature stepped into my headlight beam, and I saw what it had been working on. Carmen was propped against a Douglas fir, still alive, still breathing. Her face was gone, carved away with the same surgical precision I'd seen at every other scene. But she was conscious, looking at me with hollow sockets that should have held the most beautiful eyes I'd ever known. "She's perfect," the creature said, touching Carmen's ruined features with surgical blades that dripped with her blood. "After all these years, I finally found the right pieces. Elena will be whole again. That's when I understood the full scope of what I was facing. This wasn't just a predator hunting random victims. This was something that had loved Elena Vasquez so much that her death had driven it beyond human limits. It had been trying to bring her back, feature by feature, face by face, for 65 years. And my wife's features were the final components. The creature moved toward me with that fluid grace I'd seen in the trail camera footage. I emptied my entire clip center mass, watching bullets pass through it like it was made of fog. It reached my patrol car and placed one blade hand against the roof. The metal began to part, and I felt the car settling as hydraulics failed and my spine compressed against the seat. My legs went numb instantly, crushed by the collapsing roof structure. Trapped and helpless, I watched the creature return to Carmen. It knelt beside her and began speaking in Spanish. Elena's voice now. Words of love and apology that I somehow understood despite not speaking the language. Then it stood, touched Carmen's face one last time, and walked into the forest, wearing the features of the woman I loved more than life itself. Carmen lived for another hour. I held her hand and talked to her, even though she couldn't respond. The paramedics later said the precision of the cuts would have severed the nerves instantly. No pain, just darkness. I hope they were right. But that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. The official reports listed Carmen's death as a highway homicide by an unknown assailant. My injuries were attributed to a structural collapse during the attack. The creature's cave was explained as evidence of a disturbed individual who had since moved on to other hunting grounds. I spent 6 months in rehabilitation, learning to walk again, attending mandatory counseling sessions where I lied about what I'd really seen. When I returned to duty, they put me on desk work. File reports, answer phones, coordinate with other agencies. Safe work for a traumatized officer. But I wasn't traumatized. I was angry. And I was planning. During those long nights at the desk, I used police databases to research similar cases up and down the Pacific coast. Missing persons reports, unsolved murders, unexplained disappearances. What I found was a pattern stretching back to 1953. Moving north and south along Highway 101 like a predator following migration routes. The creature had been hunting for 70 years, perfecting its surgical techniques on hundreds of victims while searching for the perfect components to rebuild Elena Vasquez. My wife had been the final piece, but that didn't mean it was finished. Because now it could wear any face it wanted. Now it could walk among us. I started setting traps. Young women, the right age and features, driving alone on foggy nights. I would tip off local informants about vulnerable targets, making sure they traveled isolated sections of highway when conditions were perfect. Then I'd follow at a distance, radio turned off, waiting for the creature to make its move. When it did, I was ready. My first attempt failed. The creature took Sarah Chen, Margaret's younger sister. Drawn to the coast by her need to understand what had happened, I arrived too late to save her, but early enough to see the surgical process in person. The creature worked with artistic precision, each cut calculated to preserve maximum tissue while minimizing damage to surrounding areas. It collected what it needed and left Sarah alive, just like all the others. She died 3 hours later from blood loss. My second attempt was Linda Morrison, Sergeant Morrison's daughter, home from college for the summer. I made sure she was driving the right route at the right time, then followed protocol when her car was found with the roof peeled back. The third was Jessica Park, Officer Park's younger sister, who worked as a photographer in Portland. I suggested she might want to document the coastal fog patterns for an art project. Each time, I told myself it was worth the sacrifice. Each time, I got closer to the creature. Each time, I learned more about its methods and movements. By November, I had it figured out. The creature returned to specific hunting grounds on a predictable schedule, following some internal calendar that corresponded to Elena's old work rotations at the cannery. It was still living her life, even after 66 years. On November 15th, I was ready. Dr. Amanda Foster, a trauma surgeon from Portland General, was driving to a medical conference in Brookings. I'd made sure she knew about the scenic coastal route, how beautiful the fog looked rolling in from the Pacific at night. She was exactly Elena's age, with similar bone structure and the steady hands of someone who understood surgical precision. Perfect bait. I followed her car from a distance, watching as fog rolled in right on schedule. At mile marker 265, her headlights disappeared into a bank of white that seemed to swallow the highway. This time, I was already in position. I'd spent weeks preparing the ambush site. High-powered rifle with a clear line of sight, blessed silver bullets that cost me 3 months' pay, and a backup plan in case conventional weapons failed again. When Dr. Foster's car stopped in the fog, I was watching through night vision scope. The creature approached from the tree line with that familiar fluid grace, surgical blades gleaming in infrared, but something was wrong. As it circled Dr. Foster's car, it kept looking in my direction, not toward where I was hiding, but directly at me, like it knew I was there, like it had been expecting me. The creature completed its examination of the vehicle, then turned to face my position fully. Even through night vision, I could see it was still wearing Carmen's face. My wife's features, preserved and maintained through whatever unnatural process kept this thing alive. It raised one blade hand and pointed directly at me. Then it began walking toward my hiding spot with deliberate, unhurried steps. I fired 17 rounds, the entire magazine, watching each bullet pass through the creature without effect. Silver, blessed, hollow point, armor-piercing, nothing touched it. Nothing slowed it down. When it reached my position, it knelt beside me and spoke in Carmen's voice. "You understand now," it said. "You know what love really means, what we'll do to protect the people who matter most." I tried to speak, but no words came out. "Elena was everything," the creature continued, Carmen's lips forming words that had been waiting 66 years to be spoken. "When she was taken from me, I became something else. Something that could bring her back, piece by piece, life by life, until she was whole again." It gestured toward Dr. Foster's car, where I could see the surgeon still sitting behind the wheel, waiting for whatever came next. "But I don't need her anymore. I have everything I require. Your wife gave me the final pieces." That's when I understood the real horror of what I'd been doing. "You've been feeding me," I whispered. The creature smiled with Carmen's mouth. "You understand love now, what it drives us to become, how it transforms us into something beyond human limitations." I looked toward Dr. Foster's car, thinking about Sarah and Linda and Jessica and all the others I'd led to their deaths. "I'm just like you." "Yes," it said, standing and walking back toward the forest. "You are." Dr. Foster drove away that night, never knowing how close she'd come to joining the collection. The creature disappeared back into the coastal forest, carrying Carmen's face and my soul with it. I resigned from the state police the next morning. That was 18 months ago. I live alone now in a cabin outside Bandon, officially on disability for post-traumatic stress. The department thinks I'm recovering from the loss of my wife and the trauma of that night on Highway 101. But I'm not recovering. I'm evolving. Because the creature was right. Love transforms us. It makes us capable of things we never thought possible. It shows us what we're really willing to sacrifice to protect what matters most. And what matters most to me now is making sure no one else has to lose what I lost. I've been tracking the creature through missing persons reports and unexplained disappearances. It's moved north, hunting along Highway 101 inches, Washington now, still wearing Carmen's face, still perfecting its surgical techniques. But I'm not trying to stop it anymore. I'm trying to become it. I've been studying surgical procedures, learning anatomy, practicing precision cuts on animals I trap in the forest. My hands are getting steadier, my techniques more refined, because I've figured out what the creature really is. It's not a monster that loved Elena Vasquez. It's Elena Vasquez, transformed by a love so powerful it wouldn't accept death as an ending. And if love can do that for Elena, it can do it for Carmen too. I just need the right components, the right faces to rebuild what was taken from me. The creature taught me that love has no limits, no moral boundaries, no price too high to pay. I'm beginning to understand why it smiled when it walked away that night. It knew I would follow its example. It knew I would become what love demands. And it was right. Last week, I started taking pictures. Professional quality shots, carefully lit and composed. Young women with features that match Carmen's bone structure and facial proportions. I've numbered each photo in the corner with precise handwriting. Carmen Martinez. Reconstruction project. Component acquisition begins tomorrow night. Highway 101 between Bandon and Gold Beach. where love transforms us into something beyond human limitations, where the fog rolls in from the Pacific and swallows the light of our headlights, where I'll finally understand what the creature tried to teach me 18 months ago, that we become what love demands, no matter what it costs, no matter who pays the price. My name is David Chen, and I've been working the overnight shift at Fred Meyer for about a year now. I started in the produce section, but they moved me to meat and deli after a few months, when I proved I could handle the heavy lifting and wasn't squeamish about blood. Night stocking isn't glamorous work, but it pays decent, and I liked the quiet. No customers, no managers breathing down your neck, just me, my earbuds, and pallets of food to put on shelves. I'd worked retail before at smaller stores, but Fred Meyer was different. Bigger operation, more corporate. They had systems for everything: scanning protocols, temperature logs, rotation schedules. The meat department especially ran like clockwork. Fresh deliveries every Tuesday and Friday, strict USDA guidelines, everything tracked and labeled. After 12 months, I knew the routine by heart. The store I worked at was on Lancaster Drive in Salem, one of the bigger locations. Two-story building with a full grocery section downstairs and general merchandise upstairs. The meat department was in the back corner, connected to a large walk-in freezer and prep area that most customers never saw. During my shift, it was just me and maybe 2 other stockers for the whole store. Management trusted us to handle things without supervision. What happened in November 2019 changed everything I thought I knew about food safety. Hell, it changed everything I thought I knew about people. November was always crazy at Fred Meyer. Thanksgiving prep meant double the usual meat orders: turkeys, hams, roasts, ground beef for stuffing. The freezer stayed packed, and we were pulling overtime just to keep the cases stocked. I didn't mind the extra hours. I was saving up to propose to my girlfriend Sarah, and every shift brought me closer to affording the ring she'd been eyeing. The night it started was November 15th, a Friday. I came in at 11 p.m. for my usual shift, and the day crew had left me a note saying the meat grinder was acting up. Simple enough problem, probably just needed cleaning. I'd fixed it before. The meat prep area was in the back, behind the customer-facing deli counter. Industrial steel tables, commercial-grade equipment, everything sanitized and spotless. The walk-in freezer was through a heavy steel door, big enough to walk around in, with hanging rails for large cuts of meat. I grabbed my tools and headed to the grinder. It was a big Hobart unit, probably cost more than I made in 6 months. As I started taking it apart for cleaning, I noticed something odd. The grinding chamber had what looked like fabric caught in the blades. Small pieces of what might have been clothing. That was weird. We only ground meat at Fred Meyer. No mixed products, strict corporate policy. I pulled out the fabric pieces and examined them under the prep light. Definitely cloth, and not from any packaging I recognized. Blue denim, like from jeans. And there was something else caught deeper in the mechanism. I reached in with a pair of tongs and pulled out what looked like a small piece of metal. As I cleaned it off, my stomach dropped. It was a driver's license, partially shredded but still readable. Oregon license, issued to someone named Marcus Rivera. The photo showed a Hispanic guy, maybe mid-30s. I stood there for a minute, trying to make sense of it. How does someone's license end up in a meat grinder? The rational part of my brain said maybe it fell out of someone's pocket during cleaning or maintenance. But the fabric suggested something else entirely. I decided to check the walk-in freezer. If there had been some kind of contamination or accident, there might be more evidence. I pushed through the heavy door and hit the light switch. What I saw made me stumble backward into the doorframe. Hanging from the rails, right next to the regular beef carcasses, were 3 human bodies. They were hung exactly like the cattle, hooks through the ankles, heads down, partially processed. Fresh cuts showed where meat had been removed from the thighs and shoulders. Each body had a USDA inspection stamp on the chest, like they'd gone through the same approval process as livestock. I stood there, mouth open, brain refusing to process what I was seeing. The bodies looked fresh, maybe a day or 2 old. One was the Hispanic man from the license, Marcus Rivera. The others I didn't recognize, but they were clearly human. Adult males, different ages and builds. My first instinct was to run. Get out of the freezer, Call 911, let someone else deal with this nightmare. But as I turned to leave, I heard footsteps in the prep area. Someone was coming. I quickly shut off the freezer light and eased the door closed, leaving just a crack to peek through. Store manager Jim Kowalski walked into view, along with Gary from the deli. They were talking in low voices. The weekend delivery is smaller than usual, Gary was saying. Only 2 from the funeral home, and 1 was pretty old. Meat won't be as tender. We'll make it work, Jim replied. Mix it in with the regular ground beef like always. Customers can't tell the difference, especially with the seasoning we add. I felt like I was going to throw up. They were talking about the human bodies like they were just another meat delivery. This wasn't some accident or contamination. It was planned, organized. What about the new guy? Gary asked. David's been working meat more often. If he finds out, he won't, Jim said firmly. Kid's focused on his paycheck. Just make sure the prep area is clean before his shift. We can't afford another Marcus situation. Marcus situation. The guy whose license I'd found in the grinder. They moved out of my line of sight, still talking. I waited until I was sure they were gone before slipping out of the freezer. My hands were shaking as I tried to figure out what to do. Call the police? Who would believe this? And how long had it been going on? I spent the rest of my shift in a daze, mechanically stocking shelves while my mind raced. Every package of ground beef I handled made me want to vomit. How much of it was human? How many customers had unknowingly bought and eaten human meat from Fred Meyer? The next few days were torture. I showed up for work like normal, but everything felt different. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. The premium organic ground beef that customers always complimented for its unique flavor. The way certain packages were marked with small stickers that the regular stock didn't have. The locked office in the back where Jim kept special paperwork. I also started noticing my coworkers differently. Who else knew? Gary, obviously, but what about the others? How many people were involved in this? On Tuesday night, I decided to investigate the office. I'd noticed Jim had a habit of leaving it unlocked during his evening rounds. While he was checking the front of the store, I slipped inside. The office was small and cluttered, but I found what I was looking for in the filing cabinet. Invoices from 3 different funeral homes, all labeled as biological waste disposal. But instead of disposal fees, they showed payments. Fred Meyer was buying bodies from funeral homes. The paperwork laid it all out. Unclaimed bodies, people whose families couldn't afford burial or cremation, even some who had donated their bodies to science but been rejected for various reasons. The funeral homes were selling them to Fred Meyer for $50 to $200 each, depending on condition and size. There were processing notes too, instructions on butchering, mixing ratios with regular beef, even recipes for the special seasonings they used to mask any unusual taste. The human meat was labeled as premium organic and sold at a higher price point, but it got worse. I found invoices for the produce section too. Human remains that couldn't be processed for meat were being ground up and sold to local farms as specialty fertilizer. The same farms that supplied Fred Meyer's farm fresh vegetables. Even the bakery was involved. Human blood was being used in red velvet cakes, red frosting, and anything that needed red coloring. The entire store was a distribution center for cannibalism, disguised as a regular grocery chain. As I was photographing the documents with my phone, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I quickly put everything back and slipped out the back door of the office, but not before I saw Jim's silhouette in the doorway. The next morning, I noticed that Monica from Produce didn't come in for her shift. Then Carlos from Deli called in sick and never came back. By Thursday, 3 regular employees were just gone. No explanations, no forwarding information. They'd just vanished. Friday night, I found out where they went. I was stocking the meat case when I noticed new packages of ground beef with stickers I'd never seen before. Instead of the usual product codes, these had small initials written in marker. M.R. for Monica Rodriguez. C.V. for Carlos Valdez. My coworkers weren't quitting or calling in sick. They were being killed and processed into the meat I was putting on the shelves. I knew I had to get out, but I also knew I couldn't just quit without arousing suspicion. I decided to finish my shift and never come back. Maybe I could figure out how to report this to authorities from a safe distance. But Jim had other plans. As I was preparing to leave that morning, he called me into his office. Gary was there, along with 2 men I didn't recognize. large guys in work clothes who looked like they might have come from the processing area. "David," Jim said, closing the door behind me. "We need to talk." My heart was pounding, but I tried to act normal. "What's up?" "Funny thing," Jim continued. "Someone's been going through my filing cabinet, moving things around. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I started to deny it, but Jim held up his hand. "Here's the thing, David. This operation is bigger than you realize. We've got contracts with funeral homes throughout Oregon and Washington. We're expanding into California next year. This isn't some small-time thing. It's a legitimate business model." "You're selling human meat to customers," I said, my voice barely steady. "We're providing affordable protein to families," Jim corrected. "Do you know how much food goes to waste in this country while people struggle to afford groceries? We're solving two problems at once." Gary stepped forward. "The customers love it, David. They keep coming back for our ground beef, praising the flavor. They're happy. Their families are fed. Where's the harm?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were talking about cannibalism like it was a social service. "You're killing employees," I said. "Only the ones who threaten the operation," Jim replied matter-of-factly. "Most people, once they understand the scope of what we're doing, they get on board. Better pay, job security, benefits. You could be part of management, David, make real money." One of the larger men stepped closer. "Or you could be part of the product line. Your choice." They gave me the weekend to think about it. Monday night, I would either join the operation officially or become part of the inventory. There was no third option. I spent Saturday in a panic, trying to figure out what to do. Call the police? They'd want evidence, and I deleted the photos from my phone out of fear. Even if they believed me, how many people were involved? How far up did this go? Sunday night, I got my answer in the worst possible way. Sarah had been worried about me all weekend. I'd been acting strange, couldn't eat, jumping at every sound. When I told her I might quit Fred Meyer and look for other work, she offered to come with me to my shift Monday night for moral support. I told her no, that it wasn't allowed, but she insisted she'd just wait in the parking lot. At least I'd know she was there if I needed help. That was exactly what Jim was counting on. When I arrived Monday night, Jim was waiting with the same two men from Friday, but this time they had Sarah with them. She was tied to a chair in the prep area, duct tape over her mouth, terror in her eyes. "Unfortunate that she got involved," Jim said, "but it actually makes this easier. Now you can see exactly what your choice means." They led me to the meat processing area, where the industrial equipment hummed under bright fluorescent lights. The grinder I'd repaired just a week ago sat ready, cleaned and operational. "You're going to process your girlfriend," Jim told me, "start to finish. And you're going to do it while she's alive and aware. Or we'll switch positions and she'll process you." Sarah was making muffled sounds through the tape, trying to scream. The men united her from the chair, but kept her hands bound. "This is how we know people are committed," Gary explained, like he was discussing employee orientation. "Once you cross this line, you're part of the family. No going back." They positioned Sarah near the grinder and handed me the controls. She was looking at me with desperate eyes, begging without words for me to find another way. But there wasn't another way. Not for her, not for me, not for anyone who learned the truth about Fred Meyer's operation. I looked at Sarah one last time, memorizing her face, and made my choice. The sound of the grinder starting up was loud enough to cover her screams. That was 8 months ago. I'm head of processing now at our Salem location, and we're opening a second store in Portland next month. The operation has expanded beyond anything Jim originally envisioned. We have contracts with funeral homes throughout the Pacific Northwest, and we're in talks with facilities in Nevada and Northern California. The customers still love our premium ground beef. We've added a specialty line of artisan products, hand-ground meat with unique seasoning blends. Sarah's recipe is particularly popular with our weekend shoppers. I've gotten used to the taste. Actually developed quite an appetite for it. There's something about human meat, when properly prepared, that regular beef just can't match. Richer flavor, better texture. Once you've tried it, everything else seems bland. We're always looking for new suppliers too. Homeless camps, runaway shelters, anywhere people disappear without much investigation. I've gotten good at identifying the right candidates, people who won't be missed, at least not by anyone who matters. The Portland location is going to be bigger than Salem. with expanded processing facilities and room for growth. We're hiring new staff, training them properly from the beginning, so there are no more situations like mine. It's easier when people know what they're signing up for. Jim was right. It really is a legitimate business model. We're feeding families, reducing waste, and providing employment opportunities. The fact that our customers don't know exactly what they're eating doesn't change the fact that they're satisfied with the product. If you ever find yourself shopping for ground beef at Fred Meyer, try the premium organic. I guarantee it has a flavor you'll never forget. Trust me, I should know. My name is Lisa Park, and I've been a mail carrier with the United States Postal Service for 6 years. I started right here in McMinnville, Oregon, working the rural routes that snake through the farmland outside town. Most people think being a mail carrier is simple. Just drive around and drop off letters, right? But rural routes are different. You're out there alone for hours, covering hundreds of miles of back roads, dealing with aggressive dogs, bad weather, and mailboxes that are sometimes a quarter mile from the main road. You get to know your customers, their habits, their packages. After 6 years, I thought I knew everything about my route. I was wrong. What happened during the holiday season of December 2020 changed everything. I thought I knew about my job, my customers, and what people are capable of when they think no one is watching. I've never told this story before, but I can't keep carrying this secret anymore. Someone needs to know what's really happening out there in those quiet farmhouses. December 2020 was brutal for mail carriers. The pandemic had everyone ordering everything online, plus the usual holiday rush. My route normally took 8 hours, but I was pulling 12-hour days just to keep up. The worst part was the isolation. COVID meant no chit-chat with customers, no going inside to warm up, no lunch breaks at the local diner. Just me, my truck, and endless packages. My route covers about 40 miles of rural McMinnville, hitting 37 different addresses. Most are small family farms, Christmas tree growers, hazelnut orchards, and hobby farms with a few cows or horses. The houses sit way back from the road, connected by long gravel driveways lined with Douglas fir trees. During winter, the fog rolls in thick, and you can barely see 10 feet ahead. Cell service is spotty at best. I drive a standard Grumman LLV, that's a long-life vehicle, though at 200,000 miles, mine felt more like a short-life vehicle. The heater barely worked, the radio crackled with static, and the GPS was useless out there. I navigated by memory and hand-drawn maps the previous carrier had left behind. The customers on my route were mostly older folks who'd lived there for generations. The Hendersons ran a Christmas tree farm, the Kowalskis grew hazelnuts, the Pattersons raised cattle. They were polite but distant, especially during COVID. Most left notes asking me to leave packages by the mailbox rather than bringing them to the door. I was grateful. It meant less walking through mud and dog poop. But looking back now, I realized they weren't being cautious about the virus. They were being secretive about their packages. It started on December 15th, a Tuesday. I was running behind schedule because of a jackknifed truck on Highway 18. The fog was so thick, I had to use my hazard lights just to see the mailboxes. I was delivering to the Patterson place, a cattle ranch, about 15 miles out of town. Old man Patterson had been getting a lot of packages lately, which struck me as odd since his wife had died the year before and his kids lived in Portland. I pulled up to his mailbox and grabbed 3 packages from the back of my truck. They were heavy, maybe 10 pounds each, shipped overnight from something called Premium Proteins Northwest. The return address listed a Portland P.O. box. What was weird was how cold the packages felt, even through my gloves. Not just winter cold, but freezer cold. And they were making my hands damp, like they were sweating. When I set them in Patterson's delivery box, I noticed a smell. Sweet and metallic, like when you accidentally cut yourself and get blood in your mouth. I figured maybe it was some kind of specialty meat. Lots of rural folks ordered exotic stuff online. Elk steaks, bison burgers, that kind of thing. Still, something about those packages bothered me. The next day, I delivered similar packages to 4 more addresses. All from Premium Proteins Northwest, all overnight shipping, all freezer cold and damp. The Henderson place got 2. The Kowalski farm got 3. Even the old Zimmerman house at the end of Poverty Bend Road got 1. and I'd never seen any activity there except for an occasional light in the windows. By Thursday, I was delivering these packages to almost every address on my route. My truck started to smell like a butcher shop. The odor clung to my uniform, and I found myself breathing through my mouth to avoid it. What really bothered me was the weight. These weren't steaks or roasts. The packages were too heavy, too awkwardly shaped, and some of them were making sloshing sounds. On Friday, December 18th, everything changed. I was delivering to the Kowalski place when one of their packages split open as I lifted it from my truck. The cardboard was soggy with pink-tinged moisture, and when the bottom gave way, the contents spilled onto the gravel. What I saw made me drop the other packages and stumble backward. It wasn't meat, not in any way I recognized. There were chunks of what looked like human organs, a liver, maybe kidneys, and something that looked exactly like a human hand, pale and waxy, with the fingernails still attached. There was a plastic container filled with dark red liquid that could only be blood. I stood there, staring, my heart hammering in my chest. My first thought was that it had to be medical waste, or maybe specimens for a lab. But why would rural farmers be getting medical specimens? And why the overnight shipping, like it was fresh? Mrs. Kowalski appeared at her kitchen window, saw me standing over the spilled contents, and came running out. She was a small woman in her 70s, but she moved fast. "Oh, honey, don't worry about that," she said, her voice strangely calm. "Just an accident. Why don't you head on to your next stop? I'll clean this up." But as she started gathering the pieces, I saw her handling them with familiarity, like she knew exactly what they were. She picked up that human hand like someone picking up a dropped steak at the grocery store. "Mrs. Kowalski," I said, my voice shaking, "what is this stuff?" She looked up at me with pale blue eyes that suddenly seemed very cold. "Special order, dear. For the holidays. My family has particular tastes." The way she said, "particular tastes," made my skin crawl. I got back in my truck and drove to my next stop, but I couldn't stop thinking about that hand. The fingernails had been clean and manicured. Recently manicured. That weekend, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all those packages, all that overnight shipping, all those cold, heavy, damp boxes I'd been delivering for weeks. I started researching Premium Proteins Northwest online, but couldn't find anything except a basic website with no real information. Monday morning, I went to my supervisor, Janet Mills. Janet had been with the Postal Service for 25 years and knew everything about mail regulations. "Janet," I said, "I think some of my customers are getting illegal shipments, like medical waste or something worse." Janet's face went blank. "What kind of illegal shipments?" "I'm pretty sure it's human body parts. I saw organs, blood, even what looked like a human hand." Janet was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Lisa, are you sure you saw what you think you saw? Sometimes when we're working long hours, tired, stressed. I know what I saw. The thing is," Janet said slowly, "we can't just go around inspecting people's mail. That's federal law. And these customers, they've been on that route for decades. Never had a single complaint." Something in her tone bothered me. It was too casual, like she was reading from a script. "But Janet, if it's human remains, did any of the packages have hazmat labels, dry ice warnings, medical waste markings?" "No, but then they're just regular packages. Sometimes meat products can look strange when they thaw and refreeze during shipping." She leaned back in her chair. "Lisa, I think you should take a few days off. You've been working too hard." I left her office feeling like I was going crazy. But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew Janet was lying to me. Tuesday, December 22nd, I was back on my route. This time, I paid closer attention to everything. I noticed things I'd missed before. The houses on my route all had large freezers on their porches or in their garages. Several had what looked like butcher equipment, scales, knives, cutting boards. The Zimmerman place had a shed behind the house that I could smell from the road. That same sweet, metallic smell. The packages kept coming. More from Premium Proteins Northwest, but also from other companies. Harvest Moon Specialties, Select Cuts Direct, Artisan Proteins. All overnight shipping, all freezer cold, all heavy and damp. That afternoon, I delivered to a new address I'd never seen before. The old Morrison farm that had been abandoned for years. but there were fresh tire tracks in the driveway and lights in the windows. When I pulled up, I could hear sounds coming from the barn. Sounds like machinery, but also something else. Something that sounded almost like screaming. I left the packages at the mailbox and got out of there fast. Wednesday was Christmas Eve, my last day before the holiday break. I had one final delivery to the Patterson place. 3 packages from Premium Proteins Northwest. When I pulled up to the mailbox, I noticed Patterson's truck parked by the barn. The barn doors were open, and I could see inside. What I saw made me forget about breathing for a moment. There were metal tables, like operating tables. There were chains hanging from the ceiling. And there were 3 people, alive people, hanging from those chains. They were unconscious, but I could see they were breathing. 2 men and a woman, all young, all naked. There were IVs in their arms, and buckets underneath them catching blood. I was looking at a torture chamber, a human butcher shop. That's when I realized what the packages really were. These people weren't ordering specialty meat. They were ordering human meat. Fresh human meat from kidnapped people who were being kept alive and slowly butchered. I'd been delivering human body parts for months. Arms, legs, organs, blood, all of it human. All of it from people who were probably still alive somewhere, being harvested piece by piece. I grabbed my radio to call 911, but before I could speak, I heard Patterson's voice behind me. "Well, Lisa, looks like you finally figured it out." I turned around. Patterson was standing there with 2 other men I recognized, Mr. Henderson and Mr. Kowalski. They all had hunting rifles. "We were hoping you'd take the hint and just do your job," Patterson said. "But you always were too curious." "You're all insane," I whispered. Henderson laughed. "Insane? We've been eating this way for generations. My great-grandfather started this operation back in the 1922. It's tradition. The Postal Service has always been part of it," Kowalski added. "Your supervisor, Janet? Her father was a carrier on this route for 30 years. She knows exactly what we do." I understood then. The post office wasn't just allowing this, they were part of it. Carriers who learned the truth either joined the operation or disappeared. That's why Janet had been so casual about my concerns. She was protecting the conspiracy. "So what happens now?" I asked. Patterson smiled. "That depends on you. You can join us and become our official distributor. Help us expand nationwide. Or," he gestured toward the barn, "you can become our next shipment." They marched me into the barn at gunpoint. Inside, I saw the full scope of the operation. The 3 people hanging from chains were just the current inventory. There were freezers full of body parts, labeled and dated like cuts of beef. There was a computer system tracking orders and shipments. There was even a newsletter, the Harvest Report, listing special holiday deals and seasonal selections. They'd turned cannibalism into a business, a nationwide business using the Postal Service as their distribution network. "We have customers in 37 states, Patterson explained, like he was giving a business presentation. "Families like ours who appreciate the finer things. We process about 50 people a year, all carefully selected vagrants and runaways who won't be missed." He showed me order forms, requests for specific body parts, different age groups, special preparations. There were customer reviews rating the freshness and tenderness of their products. It was like Amazon for cannibals. "Your job would be expanding our delivery network," Henderson said. "Finding new carrier routes, recruiting postal workers, identifying customers. We need someone with your expertise." They gave me until morning to decide. That night, locked in Patterson's basement, I realized I had 2 choices: refuse and become their next product, or accept and help them spread this nightmare across the country. When morning came, I told them I'd do it. That was 3 years ago. Today, I'm the West Coast Regional Coordinator for what we call the network. I have mail carriers in 12 states delivering human meat to customers who pay premium prices for what they think is just exotic game. I started small, recruiting carriers who were desperate for extra money. I showed them how to identify packages, how to handle questions, how to keep quiet. Most were happy to look the other way for an extra $1,000 a month. The operation has grown beyond what Patterson ever imagined. We now have processing facilities in Oregon, California, Nevada, and Washington. We've perfected mobile processing units, disguised as mail trucks that can harvest and package victims on the move. We've developed a customer rating system based on meat quality. Young people get premium prices, older folks go to discount buyers. I've personally recruited 47 postal workers and identified over 300 customers nationwide. Last year alone, we processed 847 people. Runaways, homeless individuals, undocumented immigrants, people who won't be missed. The beautiful part is how normal it all looks. Just mail carriers doing their jobs, delivering packages. Nobody questions the Postal Service. We have federal protection, union backing, and access to every address in America. I don't think about the victims anymore. When I see people walking alone, especially young healthy ones, I automatically assess their meat value. Age, build, lifestyle, estimated processing yield. It's become second nature. Sometimes people ask me if I miss my old life, if I regret what I've become. The truth is, I don't remember feeling guilty about it. That part of me died in Patterson's barn. Now I just see walking inventory and delivery routes. If you live in a rural area and you've been getting packages from companies you don't recognize, you might want to check your neighbor's freezers. And if you're a mail carrier who's been offered extra money to look the other way about certain deliveries, remember my story. Because once you're in, the only way out is becoming the next shipment. The network is always recruiting, and we're always hungry for new products. My name is Mark Rodriguez, and I've been a substitute teacher for about 2 years now. I got into teaching because I love working with kids, and subbing seemed like a good way to get experience in different schools while figuring out where I wanted to work permanently. I've covered everything from kindergarten art classes to high school math, and I thought I'd seen it all. But what happened at Seaside Elementary School in October 2020 changed everything I thought I knew about teaching. Some lessons I learned are taught by students who should never have been in class at all. When the school district called me that Monday morning, they sounded pretty desperate. They needed someone to cover a third-grade virtual classroom at Seaside Elementary for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. The previous teacher had quit suddenly, something about a family emergency, they said. With COVID still keeping most schools online, it was just me, a laptop, and 22 8-year-olds scattered across coastal Oregon. Seaside Elementary sits about 3 blocks from the Pacific Ocean, in one of those small towns where everyone knows everyone. The school building itself was old, built sometime in the 1960s, with long hallways that echoed when you walked through them. Most days during the pandemic, the place was almost empty. Just a few staff members and kids whose parents couldn't supervise them at home. I set up my temporary classroom in room 12, which faced the ocean. The windows were tall and narrow, and when the fog rolled in from the water, you could barely see the playground outside. The district had given me a laptop with the school's virtual learning platform already installed, something called C-Learn that they'd apparently been using for years, even before the pandemic. The first few days went smoothly. I had my usual group of third graders logging in each morning at 9 a.m. sharp. There was Emma, who always had her camera perfectly positioned and her homework completed. Tyler, who liked to show off his Pokemon cards during breaks. Sarah, who was shy but always raised her hand when I asked questions. Normal kids doing normal kid things, just through a computer screen. But on Thursday morning, something felt different. When I opened the virtual classroom, there were 26 students logged in instead of the usual 22. The platform showed their names in a list on the side. The regular kids I recognized, plus 4 new ones I'd never seen before. Lucy Chen, Michael Torres, David Kim, and Amy Walsh. No one had told me about new students joining the class. I figured it was just a computer glitch, or maybe some kids from another class had gotten confused about their room assignments. "Good morning, everyone," I said into my microphone. "I see we have some new friends with us today. Lucy, Michael, David, and Amy, can you introduce yourselves to the class?" That's when I noticed their video feeds looked strange. The 4 new kids appeared on my screen just like the others, but something was off about their backgrounds. While my regular students had clear views of their bedrooms or kitchen tables, these 4 seemed to be sitting in darker spaces. The lighting was dim and blue-green, almost like they were underwater. I squinted at my laptop screen, adjusting the brightness, but I couldn't make out much detail behind them. "Hi, Mr. Rodriguez," Lucy said, her voice coming through my speakers with a strange echo. "We're excited to be in your class. Her voice sounded wet, like she was talking with water in her mouth. I checked my audio settings, thinking maybe the connection was bad, but everything looked normal. "That's wonderful, Lucy," I replied. "Where are you logging in from today?" "Home," she said simply. But when she moved slightly, I could swear I saw something floating behind her in the background, like seaweed or kelp swaying in an invisible current. I decided to just roll with it. Maybe their internet connections were poor, or their cameras were acting up. Technology problems were pretty common with virtual learning. I started the day's lesson on multiplication tables, but I kept glancing at those 4 new video feeds. The more I looked, the more unsettled I became. During our 15-minute break, I decided to check the school's enrollment system to see if I could find information about the new students. But when I logged into the district database, there was no record of any Lucy Chen, Michael Torres, David Kim, or Amy Walsh enrolled at Seaside Elementary. In fact, according to the system, I still only had 22 students assigned to my class. I was about to call the main office when the kids came back from break. This time, when the 4 new students turned on their cameras, I could see their surroundings more clearly. They definitely weren't in normal rooms. Behind Lucy, I could see what looked like a chain-link fence covered in barnacles and seaweed. Behind Michael, there were metal structures that looked like parts of a shipwreck. David appeared to be sitting near what looked like concrete steps leading down into dark water. And Amy seemed to be in front of an old wooden pier, with ropes and fishing nets hanging in the background. None of it made sense. It looked like they were all sitting underwater. "Okay, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's continue with our math lesson." But as the afternoon went on, things got stranger. The 4 new students answered questions normally, but their voices all had that same wet, echoing quality. When they moved, their movements seemed slow, like they were pushing through thick water. And occasionally, I could swear I saw bubbles floating up from the bottom of their video feeds. The worst part was what they started talking about during our afternoon sharing time. "Mr. Rodriguez," David said, raising his hand on screen. "Can we talk about our families?" "Of course, David. What would you like to share?" "I miss my mom and dad," he said, his voice heavy with sadness. "They don't know where I am. They've been looking for me for a really long time." Amy nodded in agreement. "My parents cry every night. They put flowers by the water and call my name. But I can't answer them." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, Amy? Where are your parents?" "On the beach," she said matter-of-factly. "They come to the beach every year on the day I went swimming. They bring my favorite flowers and throw them in the waves." Michael chimed in. "My family does that too. They have a special day where they remember me, but I wish I could tell them I'm okay." "Well, sort of okay." I stared at my screen, my mouth dry. "Kids, I think there might be some confusion. You're here in class with us. Your families know where you are, right?" Lucy shook her head slowly. "Mr. Rodriguez, our families think we're gone. They think we drowned. And I guess we did." The regular students in my class had gone quiet. Emma, Tyler, Sarah, and the others just stared at their screens with wide eyes. Nobody said anything for a long moment. "I think we should end class a little early today," I managed to say. "Everyone log off, and I'll see you tomorrow." One by one, my regular students left the virtual classroom. But the 4 new ones stayed online. "Mr. Rodriguez," Lucy said, once we were alone. "We really like being in your class. It's nice to feel normal again, to feel like we're still part of the world. How long have you been?" I couldn't finish the question. "I've been in the water since 1987, Michael said. "I was 7 when I drowned during a family trip to the beach." 1,995 for me, David added. "I fell off the pier during a storm." 2003, Amy whispered. "I got caught in a riptide." Lucy was the most recent. 2016. "I was playing in the waves with my cousins. A big wave came, and I got pulled under. I couldn't swim back up. I sat staring at my laptop screen, my hands trembling slightly. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of elaborate prank, or maybe I was having some sort of breakdown. We know it's hard to believe," Lucy said, as if reading my thoughts. "But we're really here. The water. It keeps us connected somehow. And your classroom, it feels safe. It feels like home." "What do you want?" I asked. The 4 children looked at each other through their screens, and then Lucy spoke for all of them. "We want what every kid wants, Mr. Rodriguez. We want to play with friends, we want to learn new things, we want to have fun." She paused, and when she continued, her voice had changed slightly. "And we want other kids to come play with us in the water. It gets lonely down here." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what the children had said, about their voices, about the impossible backgrounds in their video feeds. I tried to convince myself it was all some technical glitch or elaborate hoax, but deep down, I knew what I had seen and heard was real. The next morning, I almost called in sick, but something made me log into the virtual classroom right at 9 a.m. Sure enough, all 26 students were there. My regular 22, plus the 4 from underwater. "Good morning, class," I said, trying to sound normal. "Good morning, Mr. Rodriguez." They all chorused back. But today felt different. Today, the drowned children seemed more solid, more present. Their video feeds were clearer, and I could see details I'd missed before. Lucy was wearing a faded yellow swimsuit. Michael had on swim trunks with cartoon sharks on them. David wore a life jacket that was torn and covered in algae. Amy was in a pink one-piece with a hole in the side. During our morning lesson, Lucy raised her hand. "Mr. Rodriguez, can we have a special class trip today?" "What kind of trip, Lucy?" "A field trip to the beach. We know all the best spots. We could teach the other kids how to swim really well. Better than anyone on land can swim." Several of my regular students perked up at this suggestion. "That sounds fun," Emma said. "I love the beach." "My mom might let me go," Tyler added. "She's been working from home anyway." A knot formed in my stomach. "I don't think that's a good idea, kids. We need to stick to virtual learning for now." "Oh, it would be virtual," David said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We have a special underwater camera system. We could show everyone all the amazing things down here. The fish, the shipwrecks, the treasure. It's like a whole different world. And the water's really warm once you get used to it," Amy added. "Way warmer than the air above. We could have so much fun together." I noticed that my regular students were getting more and more excited about the idea. They started chatting among themselves about meeting up at the beach, about bringing swimsuits, about having an underwater adventure. "Everyone stop," I said firmly. "There will be no field trips to the beach. That's final." The drowned children's expressions changed, their smiles faded, and their eyes went cold. "That's disappointing, Mr. Rodriguez," Lucy said slowly. "We were really hoping you'd be more helpful." After class ended that day, I tried to research the names the children had given me. It took some digging through old newspaper archives and missing persons databases, but I found them. Lucy Chen, age 8, drowned in 1987 during a family vacation. Her body was never recovered. Michael Torres, age 7, fell from Seaside Pier during a winter storm in 1995. Coast Guard searched for 3 days before giving up. David Kim, age 8, was caught in a riptide in 2003 while playing with friends. Witnesses saw him go under but couldn't reach him in time. Amy Walsh, age 9, went missing during a school field trip to the beach in 2016. Her body washed up 3 days later. All of them had drowned in the waters off Seaside, Oregon. All of them within a few miles of the elementary school. I also found something else that made my blood run cold. Over the past 20 years, 12 children from Seaside Elementary had drowned in what officials called tragic accidents. All of them were students who had attended virtual classes during various periods when the school used online learning, snow days, sick teacher coverage, or summer enrichment programs. The pattern was always the same. Kids would be attending virtual classes normally, then they'd disappear from their homes. Their families would find them hours or days later, drowned in the ocean with no explanation of how they'd gotten there or why they'd gone into the water alone. When I got home that evening, there was a voicemail waiting for me from Emma's mother. "Hi, Mr. Rodriguez. This is Sarah Mitchell, Emma's mom. Emma's been talking non-stop about some kids in her class who live underwater and want to take everyone on a beach trip. It sounds like she's been making up stories, but she's usually not one to do that. Has there been anything unusual going on in class that I should know about?" I called her back immediately. "Mrs. Mitchell, under no circumstances should you let Emma go to the beach alone. Keep her away from the water entirely." "What? Why? What's going on?" I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. "There's been some unusual activity in our virtual classroom. Some students who shouldn't be there. I'm working with the school to resolve it, but please, just keep Emma away from the ocean for now." There was a long pause. Mr. Rodriguez, are you feeling all right? Maybe you should take a few days off. After I hung up, I tried calling the school's main office, but it was after hours and I just got voicemail. I sent an email to the principal explaining what was happening, but it sounded crazy even as I typed it. How do you tell your boss that dead children are attending your virtual classes and trying to lure living kids to their deaths? That night, I had nightmares about dark water and children's voices calling my name. Saturday morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was the principal, Dr. Henderson. Mark, I got your email. I think you need to take some time off. The stress of virtual teaching can be overwhelming, and sometimes our minds play tricks on us. Dr. Henderson, you need to check the enrollment system. Look at the names of the students attending my virtual classes. There are 4 kids listed who don't actually exist. Mark, I'm looking at the system right now. Your class roster shows 22 students. The same 22 who were assigned to you on Monday. There are no additional names. I felt like I was going crazy. But I can see them. They're in every class session. Lucy Chen, Michael Torres, David Kim, Amy Walsh. They talk to me. They interact with the other students. Mark, those names. Some of those sound familiar. I think they might be children who died years ago. Local tragedies. Mark, I really think you should see someone. Talk to a counselor. Take a mental health day. What about the previous teacher? The one who quit suddenly? Can I talk to her? There was a long pause. Mark, Mrs. Peterson didn't quit. She took her own life 3 weeks ago. We didn't want to upset the substitute teachers, so we said it was a family emergency. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. What? She left a note saying she couldn't watch any more children die. She'd been having what her family described as paranoid delusions about students in her virtual classes who weren't really there. We thought it was just the stress of pandemic teaching. I hung up and sat staring at my laptop. I knew I should stay away, should listen to Dr. Henderson and take time off. But I also knew that on Monday morning, 22 living children would log into that virtual classroom, and 4 dead ones would be waiting for them. Monday came too soon. I logged into the CLearn platform with shaking hands. All 26 students were already online and waiting. "Good morning, Mr. Rodriguez," they called out in unison, but now I could clearly hear the difference between the living voices and the dead ones. "Good morning, class," I replied weakly. "Mr. Rodriguez," Lucy said with a smile that was too wide. "We have a special announcement today." "Oh? We've planned a surprise beach day. Some of our classmates are already on their way to meet us at the water." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Tyler's face appeared larger on my screen as he moved closer to his camera. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm at the beach right now. Emma and Sarah are here too. The underwater kids told us exactly where to meet them." I could see water behind Tyler. He was standing on wet sand with waves in the background. Through his tablet's camera, I could see Emma and Sarah walking into the surf nearby. "Tyler, get out of the water right now. All of you, get back to shore." "But Mr. Rodriguez," Emma's voice called out, "Lucy and the others are right here. They're showing us how to breathe underwater. It's amazing." I watched in horror as Emma waded deeper into the waves. The water was up to her chest now, then her shoulders. "Emma, no, get out of there." But she was smiling, looking down into the water as if she was having a conversation with someone I couldn't see. She took a deep breath and ducked her head underwater. She didn't come back up. "Emma," I screamed at my screen. Tyler was waist-deep now, and Sarah was right behind him. Other students in the class were cheering them on, asking when they could join the fun. I frantically tried calling 911, but how do you explain that children are drowning because dead kids in a virtual classroom told them to go to the beach? One by one, I watched my students disappear beneath the waves. Tyler went under while laughing about how much fun it was. Sarah followed them with a peaceful expression on her face, as if she was going home. Lucy's voice came through my speakers, clearer than ever. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. It gets so lonely down here. Now we have new friends to play with." The 4 dead children's video feeds showed them clearly now. Not in underwater locations, but in a bright, sunny classroom that looked exactly like room 12 at Seaside Elementary. Behind them, I could see Emma, Tyler, and Sarah taking seats at desks, their clothes still dripping with seawater but their faces happy and content. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Rodriguez," Lucy said as the virtual classroom session ended automatically. That afternoon, the Coast Guard found 3 bodies washed up on Seaside Beach. The news reported it as a tragic accident. 3 children who had somehow wandered away from their homes and drowned in a freak incident. Their families were devastated, confused about why their kids had gone to the ocean alone. I quit teaching that day. I couldn't do it anymore. But the school district called me back 2 weeks later. Another teacher had taken leave. That's what they called it now instead of suicide. They needed someone to cover the same virtual classroom. "I can't," I told them. "Mark, we're desperate. The kids need consistency. It's just virtual learning. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? Everything." But they offered me double pay, and my own kids needed food on the table. My wife had lost her job during the pandemic, and we were behind on rent. So I took the job again. This time, when I logged into the virtual classroom on Monday morning, there were 25 students waiting for me. My 22 regular kids, plus Lucy, Michael, David, and Amy. But now Emma, Tyler, and Sarah were there too, their video feeds showing the same underwater classroom as the others. "Welcome back, Mr. Rodriguez," Lucy said sweetly. "We missed you." "We have some new friends now," Emma added, her voice carrying that same wet echo as the others. "And we're excited to make even more friends soon." I looked at my list of living students. 19. Now instead of 22. 19 children whose parents trusted me to keep them safe during virtual learning. "Who should we invite to visit us next?" Lucy asked the group. The dead children began discussing which of my remaining students would be the most fun to play with underwater. They talked about lonely kids, kids whose parents worked long hours, kids who lived close to the beach. I knew I should log off, should call the police, should do anything except sit there and enable what was happening. But I also knew that Mrs. Peterson had tried to fight them, and she'd ended up dead. I knew that other teachers before her had probably tried to stop it too. And I knew that if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't help them choose their next victims, they would come for my own children. That night, Lucy appeared on my home computer. Not in the virtual classroom, on my personal laptop while I was checking email. "Hello, Mr. Rodriguez," she said from my screen. "We need to talk." "What do you want?" "Your help. We've been doing this for a very long time, but it's getting harder. Parents are more suspicious now. Schools have better technology. We need a teacher who understands how to make things look normal." "I won't help you kill children." Lucy's image flickered, and for a moment I saw her as she really was, bloated, decomposing, with seaweed tangled in her hair and empty sockets where her eyes should be. "You don't have a choice," she said. "We know where you live. We know where your children go to school. 7-year-old Miguel and 5-year-old Sophia, right? Such beautiful names, such beautiful children." My blood turned to ice. "Leave my kids alone. Then help us. Make sure our virtual field trips continue. Make sure the right children get invited to visit us. Do this, and your family stays safe." The screen went dark. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've helped them take 7 more children. 7 kids whose parents think they drowned in accidents, when really they were lured to their deaths by classmates who had been dead for decades. I pick the targets carefully now. Kids from broken homes where the investigation won't be too thorough. Kids whose parents are too busy or too poor to ask too many questions. Kids who won't be missed as much as others. I hate myself for it. I drink every night to try to forget the sound of their voices as they go under the water. But every time I think about stopping, I remember Lucy's threat about my own children. I've become exactly what the dead children needed, a recruiter who helps them hunt. Someone who can identify the vulnerable kids and make sure they end up in the virtual classroom where they can be influenced and eventually lured to the beach. The school district thinks I'm their most reliable substitute teacher now. They keep assigning me to the same virtual classroom, and I keep accepting the jobs. They don't ask why so many students from my classes have accidents at the beach. Sometimes I see the parents of the drowned children around town. They look broken, hollow, like pieces of their souls drowned along with their kids. They don't know that their children are still attending school every day, still learning and playing, just not with the living anymore. The worst part is that the dead children are happy now. They have a growing class of new friends, and they know I'll keep providing more. They've learned to be patient, to space out their hunts so it doesn't look like a pattern. And they've promised me that as long as I keep cooperating, As long as I keep feeding them the children they need, my own kids will be safe. But I know that promise won't last forever. Eventually, they'll get bored with me. Eventually, they'll want my children too. And when that day comes, I'll have to make the same choice every other teacher before me made. The only difference is, I'm not strong enough to take the other way out like Mrs. Peterson did. So I keep teaching. I keep logging into that virtual classroom every day, looking at faces both living and dead. And I keep identifying the next child who will accidentally drown while their classmates cheer them on from beneath the waves. If your child goes to a school that uses virtual learning and they start talking about underwater classmates who want to take them on field trips to the beach, don't let them go. Don't trust their teacher to keep them safe. Because that teacher might be someone like me, someone who's too weak to say no, too afraid for his own family to do what's right. And the children calling from beneath the water are always hungry for new friends. My name is Susan Torres, and I've been a park ranger for 12 years. I started at Yellowstone right out of college, then Mount Rainier, before getting my assignment at Crater Lake National Park in Oregon. In 12 years, I've pulled bodies out of crevasses, tracked down lost hikers in blizzards, and talked suicidal visitors off cliff edges. I thought I understood every kind of danger these wilderness areas could throw at people. I was wrong. What I'm about to tell you happened during the summer of 2020, when COVID travel restrictions had cleared out most of our normal crowds. The Park Service has classified this information, and sharing it could end my career and probably land me in federal prison. But after what happened to my daughter last month, I can't stay quiet anymore. Sometimes the things we're paid to protect people from aren't what we think they are. June 2020 felt like working in a ghost town. Instead of our usual 2,000 daily visitors, we'd get maybe 30 people spread across 183,000 acres. The silence was unnatural. Crater Lake sits in the collapsed caldera of an ancient volcano, and normally the rim drive buzzes with tour buses and car engines. Without that noise, you could hear every wind gust, every rockfall, every sound echoing off those 2,000-foot cliff walls. I was assigned to backcountry patrol, which meant spending my days checking on the handful of campers who'd managed to get permits. The lake itself is almost 2,000 feet deep, one of the deepest in North America, formed when Mount Mazama collapsed 7,700 years ago. No streams flow in or out. The water comes only from rain and snow melt, which is why it's so incredibly pure and blue. On calm days, you can see 100 feet down. My patrol truck was equipped with standard ranger gear, GPS navigation, satellite emergency phone, VHF radio system, first aid supplies rated for wilderness rescue. I'd been working the same routes for 3 years. I knew every trail marker, every camping spot, every radio dead zone where the cliff walls blocked signals. The Henderson family was supposed to check out of campsite 12 on Tuesday morning. When they didn't show up at the visitor center by checkout time, dispatch radioed me to do a welfare check. Standard procedure: people oversleep, forget to pack up, sometimes just ignore checkout times. I drove the service road to within half a mile of their site, then hiked the trail. It was 11 a.m., bright sunshine, perfect camping weather. Their blue dome tent was still set up, camp chairs arranged around a cold fire pit, Coleman cooler sitting on the picnic table. Their Toyota Camry was parked in the designated spot, hiking boots lined up neatly by the tent entrance. Everything looked exactly like a family that had gone for a morning hike, except something felt wrong in a way I couldn't name. Park Service. I called out, following standard protocol. Routine. Campsite check. The silence that came back wasn't normal. Not the silence of an empty campsite. This was different, heavier. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I tried again, louder. Henderson family? Anyone in camp? Nothing. Their reservation showed 3 people. Parents in their 40s, teenage daughter. The tent was zipped shut, but not locked. Park regulations required me to announce myself before entering anyone's campsite, but 12 years of experience had taught me to trust my instincts. Something was very wrong here. I unzipped the tent entrance. David Henderson was sitting upright in his sleeping bag, back against the tent wall, staring toward the lake through the mesh window. His eyes were open, clear, focused. His wife Linda was lying on her side, arm curved under her head like she was still asleep. Their 16-year-old daughter Sarah sat cross-legged in her sleeping bag, hands positioned like she'd been reading a book. They looked completely, perfectly normal, except none of them were breathing. I've found dead bodies before. Heart attacks, hypothermia, falls, one suicide. Death has a particular stillness to it, a weight that changes the air around a body. But this was different. These people looked like they were still alive, just paused. I checked David's pulse first. Nothing. No pulse, no breath, but his skin was warm and had normal color. His eyes were clear, not cloudy like you'd expect after several hours. Linda was the same. Warm skin, normal color, but completely lifeless. Sarah looked like she might open her eyes any second. I radioed for backup immediately. Dispatch, Ranger Torres, at Campsite 12. I have 3 deceased individuals. Circumstances unknown. I need medical examiner and supervisor response. Static crackled back. Torres, confirm 3 deceased. Any apparent cause? Negative on apparent cause. No visible trauma, no signs of illness. They look like they're still camping. While waiting for backup, I did a preliminary investigation. No signs of struggle in or around the tent, no unusual odors, no gas, no chemicals, no decomposition smell. Their food was properly stored in the bear box. No medication bottles, no alcohol. The camp stove hadn't been used recently. Nothing suggested carbon monoxide poisoning, and they weren't using any fuel-burning equipment inside the tent anyway. Within 2 hours, I had County Coroner Pete Kowalski and my supervisor Chief Williams at the site. Pete had been doing this job for over 20 years. He'd seen everything from logging accidents to meth lab explosions. His preliminary examination left him visibly shaken. "Susan," he said quietly, pulling me aside, "you need to see this. But I'm warning you, it's not like anything I've encountered." He showed me what he'd discovered during his initial assessment. The Henderson family wasn't just dead, they were empty, completely hollow. Someone or something had removed every internal organ, every drop of blood, every bit of soft tissue, but left the skin completely intact, like they'd been drained through their mouths and somehow vacuum sealed back together. "There's no entry point," Pete whispered, his hands actually shaking as he wrote notes. "No wounds, no incisions, no trauma to the mouth or throat. It's like someone sucked out everything inside them through a straw, but there's no evidence of how." The skin maintained perfect structural integrity. When pressed, it felt like an empty sleeping bag, flexible, but with nothing underneath. Yet from the outside, they looked exactly like living people who had simply stopped moving. Chief Williams took photographs, called the state police, contacted the FBI. Within hours, we had a team of federal investigators swarming the campsite. They tested for biological weapons, chemical agents, radioactive contamination. Every test came back negative. The official report listed cause of death as sudden cardiac arrest due to unknown natural causes. The Henderson family was cremated within 48 hours before any detailed autopsy could be performed. The Park Service said it was to spare the family additional trauma, but I noticed how quickly they pushed for cremation. That night, alone in my cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. In 12 years of ranger work, I developed a reputation for staying calm under pressure. But this was different. This felt deliberate, intelligent. 2 weeks later, I was reviewing footage from the trail cameras I'd installed around backcountry campsites after the Henderson incident. Basic motion-activated units, nothing fancy, just insurance, in case something else happened and we needed evidence. The camera at Site 12 had triggered at 2:47 a.m. the night before the Hendersons were found. But according to our records, they'd been dead for at least 6 hours by that time. I downloaded the images to my laptop right there in my truck. The first several frames showed nothing unusual. Empty campsite, normal shadows from the three-quarter moon. Then at 2:47 a.m., something appeared at the edge of the frame. Something moving in the lake water, about 200 yards offshore. At first glance, it looked like a floating log or debris, but logs don't move with purpose, and this thing was swimming, flowing. The motion was too organized, too directed to be random. The next image, taken 30 seconds later, showed the object closer to shore, much closer, and much larger than I'd initially thought. The shape was serpentine, long, segmented, thick as a city bus. Easily 200 feet from head to what I assumed was the tail, though most of it remained underwater. In the third image, taken at 2:48 a.m., I could make out what appeared to be a head section emerging near the shoreline. Massive, easily the size of a small car, with what looked like sensory organs or appendages around a central opening. The final image showed something that made my hands shake as I stared at the laptop screen. The creature had extended what looked like a feeding tube from that central opening. Long, flexible, narrow like an elephant's trunk, but at least 50 feet in length. The tube was reaching directly toward the area where the Henderson tent had been positioned. Then, the camera went dead. Not just the images, the entire unit had lost power. I sat in my truck for over an hour, staring at those photographs. Part of my mind tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Digital artifacts, shadows, maybe some kind of equipment malfunction, but I knew what I was looking at. The next morning, I drove to the Klamath Tribe's cultural center. If something was living in that lake, the tribal elders might have knowledge about it. The Klamath people had been here for thousands of years before the first white settlers arrived. Margaret Brayboy, a woman in her 70s who served as the tribal historian, agreed to meet with me. When I described what I'd found, the drained bodies, the camera images, her expression became very serious. "You've seen Kamukamch," she said, "the lake keeper." She told me stories that had been passed down through generations. Before Mount Mazama collapsed, before Crater Lake existed, a powerful guardian spirit lived in the rivers and streams of this area. When the mountain fell and the lake formed, the spirit became trapped in the deep water. For thousands of years, it had maintained the natural balance, feeding on fish and deer, keeping the ecosystem healthy. But the lake has been poisoned, Margaret said sadly. Acid rain, chemicals washing down from roads and parking lots, exhaust fumes from boats and cars. The keeper has become sick, corrupted. Its hunger has changed. "What does it want now?" I asked, her eyes filled with tears. Human life force carries more energy than animal life, and the keeper has learned to hate what humans have done to its home. It's not just feeding anymore, it's taking revenge. I wanted to dismiss this as folklore, but the evidence was sitting on my laptop, and Margaret's explanation made sense of things that science couldn't address. Over the next 6 weeks, 4 more incidents occurred. A solo backpacker found drained near the lakeshore, positioned like he'd been sitting and enjoying the view. 2 park maintenance workers discovered empty in their service truck after working a late shift. A photographer who'd been documenting wildflowers found the next morning in her tent, camera still in her hands but no pictures on the memory card, after 11 p.m. Each time, the pattern was identical, bodies positioned normally, completely hollow inside, no signs of trauma or struggle. The Park Service formed a task force. They brought in specialists from the CDC, EPA, even some military personnel who asked very specific questions about biological warfare. They tested water samples, soil samples, air quality. Everything came back normal. But my trail cameras kept capturing the creature, always between midnight and 4 a.m., always near areas where humans had been during the day. The images showed it learning our patterns, studying when and where people would be most vulnerable. It seemed to prefer isolated campsites, single tents, people who were alone or separated from others. The creature was hunting us. That's when Chief Williams called me into his office for what he described as a career development conversation. I'd been with the Park Service for 12 years. I had an excellent performance record, commendations for several difficult rescues, and a spotless safety record. I was eligible for promotion to senior ranger, which came with a substantial pay increase and better pension benefits. But first, Williams said, I needed to understand how the Park Service really operated. He pulled out a thick file folder marked Classified, Crater Lake Special Incidents. "Susan," he said calmly, "we've known about the lake keeper for over 40 years. The file contained photographs, witness statements, incident reports, and cover-up documentation going back to the 1,970 missing persons cases that were officially listed as accidental drownings or hiking accidents, tourist deaths that were attributed to heart attacks or altitude sickness, all following the same pattern I'd been documenting. Why hasn't anyone done anything?" I demanded. Williams leaned back in his chair. "What would you suggest? Kill a creature that might be the last of its species? Drain one of the world's most pristine lakes? Create mass panic about a lake monster? Shut down a park that generates $50 million annually for the local economy? He showed me tourism statistics. Before COVID, Crater Lake hosted over 700,000 visitors per year. The Park Service employed 200 people directly, and thousands more jobs in surrounding communities depended on tourism revenue. The park's reputation for safety and natural beauty was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't eliminate problems we can't solve, Williams continued. We manage them. That's when I learned about the real purpose of my job. The Park Service had developed a system for managing the lake keeper situation. They monitored its feeding patterns, tracked its movements, and carefully controlled visitor access to minimize casualties. Trail closures during high-risk periods, campsite restrictions in dangerous areas, strategic maintenance, work that kept people away from hunting zones. Most importantly, Williams said, we direct the creature toward appropriate targets. He explained it like wildlife management. Every ecosystem has predators and prey. The lake keeper was simply a predator that had evolved beyond normal parameters. To maintain balance, they needed to ensure it fed regularly enough to prevent more aggressive hunting behavior. Think of it as controlled sacrifice, he said. We lose 3 to 5 people per year to keep the creature satisfied. Without management, it might kill dozens. The promotion came with a new job description. I would be responsible for identifying visitors who were low risk for generating public attention if they disappeared. Solo travelers with no local connections. People who seemed disrespectful to the environment. Families from far away who wouldn't have resources to investigate if something happened. My job was to guide them to specific campsites during specific time windows when the lake keeper would be hunting. You'll be saving hundreds of lives, Williams assured me. The few we sacrifice protect the many. The salary increase was substantial, nearly double my current pay. The pension benefits would ensure financial security for the rest of my life. And if I refused, Williams made it clear that my career with the Park Service would end immediately, along with very negative references that would prevent me from getting similar work elsewhere. I thought about my daughter, Emma, who was starting college in the fall and would need financial support. I thought about my mortgage, my retirement savings, my future. I took the promotion. That was 5 years ago. Since then, I've guided 57 people to their deaths. I developed criteria for selection. People who left trash in campsites, visitors who ignored posted signs or safety regulations, tourists who seemed entitled or disrespectful. I told myself I was protecting the majority by sacrificing those who didn't deserve protection. The system worked efficiently. I would identify appropriate targets during routine interactions, checking permits, providing campsite recommendations, offering insider tips about the best spots for wildlife photography or stargazing. I'd guide them to specific sites during time windows when the lake keeper would be hunting. The creature and I developed a partnership. I fed it regularly, and it stayed away from high-traffic areas and main camping zones. Tourist deaths actually decreased after I started managing the feeding schedule. But the psychological cost has been devastating. I stopped sleeping through the night. I developed anxiety attacks whenever I heard certain sounds, the hiss of air being sucked through a tube, the splash of something large moving through water. I started drinking heavily to numb the guilt, then forced myself to quit because I couldn't risk making mistakes that might expose the operation. The worst part was watching myself change. Each decision became easier. Each rationalization felt more reasonable. I stopped seeing the victims as people and started viewing them as problems to be solved. I became efficient at identifying personality traits that made someone disposable. I got better at reading people, understanding their vulnerabilities, manipulating their choices. I was becoming a predator myself. 3 months ago, my daughter Emma brought her new boyfriend to visit. She'd just graduated college and wanted to show him Crater Lake before they moved to Portland together. Kevin was everything I'd learned to hate in tourists. He complained constantly about park regulations, threw cigarette butts on the trails despite my direct warnings, carved his initials into a 200-year-old tree while I was standing 20 feet away, made jokes about stupid environmental rules, and bragged about littering in other national parks. Emma was in love with him, but I could see what he really was. Selfish, destructive, disrespectful, exactly the kind of person who made my job easier. I started planning his disappearance. I recommended they try backcountry camping for a more authentic experience, suggested specific sites that would be perfect for romantic privacy. Checked the feeding schedule and identified a window when the lake keeper would be hunting. I was going to feed my daughter's boyfriend to a lake monster, and I felt completely justified doing it. That's when I realized I'd lost my humanity entirely. The night before they were supposed to leave for their camping trip, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma's face when she talked about Kevin. She saw something in him that I didn't or couldn't anymore. Maybe he was just young and stupid rather than evil. Maybe he could change, learn, become better. Maybe I'd become so good at justifying murder that I could rationalize killing anyone. At 3 a.m., I called Emma and told her Kevin had food poisoning and they should postpone the trip. It was a lie, but it saved his life. And it made me realize I couldn't do this anymore. 2 weeks ago, I submitted my resignation to Chief Williams. He didn't accept it. "You know too much," he said simply, "and you're too good at the job. We can't let you walk away." He showed me photographs of Emma taken outside her apartment in Portland, images of her daily routine, her new job, her favorite coffee shop. "Your daughter has such a bright future ahead of her," Williams said. "It would be tragic if something happened to interfere with that." The message was clear. I could continue doing my job, or my daughter would become another victim of the lake keeper. So I'm still here, still guiding people to their deaths, still maintaining the feeding schedule that keeps a corrupted lake spirit satisfied and the tourist economy running smoothly. But I'm also writing this testimony. I've documented everything: the classification system I used to select victims, the feeding schedule, the cover-up procedures, the financial records showing how much money the Park Service saves by managing casualties rather than preventing them. I've copied files, recorded conversations, and gathered evidence that proves the Park Service has been systematically murdering tourists for decades. If something happens to me, or to Emma, this information will be released to every major news organization, congressional committee, and law enforcement agency in the country. The lake keeper isn't the only monster at Crater Lake. Sometimes the real horror isn't what lives in the dark water at the bottom of a volcanic crater. Sometimes it's what ordinary people become when they're given just enough power and just enough rationalization to turn murder into policy. I've been feeding a lake monster for 5 years, but I've been feeding something much worse inside myself. Last week, a young family set up camp at Site 18, a father, mother, and 2 small children. Perfect targets according to my criteria. Out-of-state plates, no local connections, camping style suggested they wouldn't be quickly missed. I recommended they try the exclusive backcountry sites for better wildlife viewing. They're scheduled to be there tonight. The lake keeper will be hunting. And I just realized I don't remember what their faces look like anymore. I've become something that can look at children and see only feeding opportunities for a monster. I've lost the ability to see victims as human beings rather than problems to be managed. But it's not too late to warn them. It's never too late to remember what we're supposed to be protecting people from, even if that means protecting them from ourselves. My name is Mike Roberts, and I've been a logging crew foreman for 15 years here in Oregon. Started as a choker setter right out of Gresham High School, worked my way up through faller, equipment operator, and finally crew chief for independent contractors throughout the Cascades. I've got my commercial driver's license, Level 2 first aid certification, and I've supervised timber operations from the Coast Range to the Blue Mountains. I've seen guys get crushed by widowmakers on the Siuslaw, watched million-dollar equipment roll down mountainsides near Crater Lake, and dealt with everything from Earth First, protesters chaining themselves to old growth, to the 2020 fires that burned half the state. I thought I'd seen every kind of hell the Oregon woods could throw at you, but what happened in October 2018 at a salvage site 20 miles east of Government Camp changed everything I thought I knew about these forests. And before you ask, yes, this really happened. The Forest Service has the incident reports buried so deep they'll never see daylight. But I kept my own records. I still have photos. I still wake up screaming some nights. The media called it the Mount Hood Missing Persons Cluster. 43 hikers vanished between 2015 and 2018 inches, a 12-square-mile area of the National Forest. Search and rescue found abandoned campsites, scattered gear, vehicles left at trailheads, but no bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. People just disappeared. The FBI brought in profilers, thinking serial killer. The state police suspected drug cartels using the forest for body disposal. Conspiracy theorists blamed everything from Sasquatch to government black sites. Nobody suspected the truth, because the truth was impossible. We were cutting beetle-killed Douglas fir on Forest Service Contract FS2847B, 40 acres of standing dead timber on a steep north-facing slope. Standard salvage operation. The mountain pine beetle had chewed through these trees 3 years running, and the Forest Service wanted them cleared before fire season. Good money, straightforward work, and I had my regular crew. Tommy Martinez on the feller buncher, Sarah Chen running the skidder, with Jake Peterson and Ray Hoffman handling delimbing and loading. The contract was with Cascade Timber Solutions, a mid-sized outfit based in Salem that I'd worked with since 2012. Clean safety record, fair wages, always paid on time. The site supervisor was Dennis Walsh, a 20-year veteran who knew his business. Professional operation all the way. Oregon weather in October is always a coin flip. You might get those golden Indian summer days with clear skies and 70-degree afternoons, or you might get the first winter storms rolling in from the Pacific. That year we caught a break. Cool mornings, with ground fog, but it would burn off by 10 and we'd have perfect working conditions until sunset. The trees were bone dry from 3 years of drought and beetle damage. Their bark peeled off in sheets, and Tommy could drop them clean and fast with the Tiger Cat feller buncher. My job was keeping everyone safe, coordinating equipment, movement, and staying on schedule. We had 18 days to clear 40 acres, tight but doable with good weather. On October 15th, our third day cutting, we started on the upper slope where the beetle kill was worst. These Doug firs had been standing dead so long that woodpeckers had riddled them with holes, and most had lost their tops to wind. Perfect salvage timber. Light, dry, easy to handle. Tommy radioed me around 9:30 a.m. "Mike, you need to get up here. Something's not right with this timber." I hiked up the 40% grade to where he'd shut down the feller buncher. Tommy was standing beside a Doug fir he'd just dropped, staring at the stump. When I got closer, I understood why he'd stopped working. The stump was bleeding. Not the clear or amber sap you sometimes see in pine species. This was dark red, thick as motor oil, pooling in the saw kerf and running down the bark in rivulets. The metallic smell hit me next, sharp, copper bright, exactly like the deer processing shed at my uncle's farm. "Jesus, Tommy, what the hell is that?" He held up his chainsaw. The cutting chain was fouled with what looked like human hair. Long brown strands tangled around the drive links and guide bar, so thick the chain couldn't turn. Tommy had been cutting timber for 14 years, and I'd never seen his hands shake. "I thought maybe a squirrel nest got caught up in the branches," he said. "You know how they build those big drays in Douglas fir. But this..." He pulled a clump of hair free from the chain. Definitely human. Clean, healthy, about 2 feet long with natural curl. "This came from inside the tree, Mike, from the heartwood." I radioed Dennis Walsh and told him we had a situation. He drove up in his white F-250 within 20 minutes, took one look at the bleeding stump, and got on his satellite phone with the main office in Salem. After 15 minutes of hushed conversation, he came back over. "Keep cutting," he said. "You get weird stuff in timber sometimes. Animals den in hollow trees, people carve initials, hippies used to live in the big ones back in the 70s. Nothing we haven't seen before." That didn't sit right with me. These weren't old-growth trees. They were 60, maybe 70 years old, planted after clear cuts in the 1,940 seconds and 50 seconds. They'd been standing dead for 3 years. No way something could be living inside them. But Dennis was the site supervisor, and we had a contract to fulfill. Tommy cleaned his chain and fired up the feller buncher again. The next tree went down normal, but when we walked over to check the stump, it was bleeding too. Heavier this time, and when I knelt down for a closer look, I could see what looked like blood vessels running through the wood grain. Not normal growth rings, actual veins and arteries, threading through the timber like a circulatory system. Sarah came over from the skidder. "Mike, I don't like this. This isn't natural." I called Dennis again on the radio. This time, it took him an hour to drive back up, and he brought someone with him. A tall, thin man in his 50s, wearing a Cascade timber jacket but no name tag or hard hat. They spent 20 minutes examining the stumps, taking photographs with an expensive-looking camera, and making phone calls. "Keep cutting," Dennis said finally. "We're sending samples to the lab at OSU, but the contract's got deadlines. Time is money." But by now, word was spreading through the crew. Ray Hoffman found fingernails embedded in the bark of a tree he was delimbing. Real human fingernails, complete with cuticles, torn out like someone had been clawing at something. Jake discovered what looked like dental fillings scattered around another stump, amalgam and gold, the kind my dentist in Portland used. The third tree Tommy cut screamed. Not the creaking groan that big timber makes when it falls, not the sharp crack of splitting wood, a human scream, muffled but unmistakable, coming from inside the trunk as the feller buncher's 24-inch bar bit through the bark. High-pitched, desperate, the sound of someone in agony. Tommy shut down immediately and climbed out of the cab, his face white as paper. "I'm done, Mike. I'm not cutting any more of these things." But that's when we noticed something worse. The blood wasn't just coming from fresh cuts anymore. It was seeping from old scars in the bark, from broken branch stubs, from anywhere the trees had ever been damaged. All the timber we'd already harvested was bleeding, and the metallic smell was getting stronger. Jake pointed at something white lodged in Tommy's saw teeth. I worked it loose with my Leatherman and almost dropped it. A human tooth. An upper molar with the root still attached, like it had been yanked from someone's mouth. Dennis drove back up that afternoon with 3 more guys in Cascade timber jackets. They set up a command trailer with a diesel generator and told us we'd be working extended shifts. Time and a half for overtime. $5,000 completion bonus if we finished ahead of schedule. "These trees are specialty timber," Dennis explained. "Unique grain patterns, very unusual properties. There's a high-end market for this kind of wood. Custom furniture. Makers, collectors. You guys just hit the lottery." The new crew supervisor was a guy named Bill Krantz, who didn't talk much and wore industrial hearing protection, even when the saws were shut down. Bill could run the feller buncher for 12 hours straight without breaks, and he didn't seem bothered by the sounds coming from the trees. Because they all made sounds now. Every single tree, the moment the saw touched bark. Human voices. Definitely human, some trying to form words. I heard, "Help me," and "Please stop," and something that sounded like "kill me" coming from a big Doug fir we took down on Thursday morning. Krantz told us to wear double ear protection at all times. By Friday, the crew was developing problems that had nothing to do with normal logging injuries. Sarah's arms and neck broke out in a rash that looked like tree bark. Rough, brown, with deep furrows that didn't hurt when you pressed them. Ray started complaining that his bones ached, especially his spine and ribs. When he lifted his shirt, we could see dark lines under his skin following his skeletal structure, like something was growing along the bone. Dennis brought in a company doctor who examined everyone and said we were fine. Contact dermatitis from handling the timber, maybe some repetitive stress from the long shifts. He handed out prescription cortisone cream and 800 milligram ibuprofen. But Saturday morning, I found Jake standing motionless next to a live hemlock, his hand pressed against the bark, completely unresponsive. When I got closer, I saw that his boots had split open and root-like growths were extending from his feet into the forest floor. It took 3 of us pulling to break him free, and he screamed the whole time like we were tearing his skin off. That night, Dennis finally told me what was really happening. "This isn't beetle damage, Mike," he said, showing me a manila folder full of photographs and reports. "These trees used to be people. Hikers, campers, missing persons from all over the Pacific Northwest. There's an organism in this forest, some kind of fungal parasite, that infects humans and slowly converts their cellular structure to wood fiber. But it keeps the nervous system intact. They're still conscious in there." He spread out before and after photos on the tailgate of his truck. The same locations, but the before shots showed human beings standing where trees now grew. A young woman in REI hiking gear who'd become a western hemlock. A man in Carhartt jacket and jeans now transformed into a massive cedar. Dozens of them, all documented, all cataloged with dates and GPS coordinates. How long has Cascade known about this? Company's been harvesting here since 1987. The wood has properties you can't get anywhere else. It's responsive, almost alive. Furniture made from conscious timber reacts to touch, adjusts to the user, sometimes even shows emotional responses. We've got buyers in Tokyo paying $2 million for a single dining table, billionaires in Dubai, tech moguls in Silicon Valley. This is the most valuable timber in the world. Dennis offered me a promotion to site manager for the entire operation. They had cultivation areas now, he said, places where they brought specific individuals to be infected and transformed. Homeless people from Portland, addicts from treatment centers, undocumented workers, runaway teens, people society had already written off. The conversion process takes 6 months, he explained. The subject remains fully conscious throughout, but the profit margins are incredible. Your son Danny just graduated high school, right? Planning to study forestry at OSU? This kind of money could set your whole family up for generations. I should have run. Should have gathered my crew and gotten the hell out of those woods. But the money was real, and Danny's college tuition was due in January, and my wife Linda had been talking about that debt consolidation loan. Monday morning, Danny drove up with his girlfriend Ashley to check out the logging operation. He was excited about maybe working summers for me while he studied forestry, wanted to see what his old man did for a living. I tried to talk him out of coming, but he'd already taken the day off from his job at Home Depot. I kept them close, showed them the safety procedures, let them watch equipment operation from a safe distance. But around lunchtime, while I was dealing with a hydraulic leak on the skidder, they wandered off to explore. I found them an hour later, unconscious beside something I can only describe as the most beautiful and terrible thing I've ever seen. It wasn't exactly a mushroom, though that's the closest comparison. 20 feet tall, pale white with a smooth, wet surface that pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. Hairline cracks radiated out from its base, and thin root systems spread through the forest floor like a web. But the worst part was the sound, whispers coming from deep inside it. Hundreds of voices, maybe thousands, all talking at once. Danny was already changing. His skin had taken on a bark-like texture, and his feet were beginning to elongate and spread into the soil. But he was conscious. His eyes tracked my movement, and when I knelt beside him, he whispered, "Dad, help me." The voices from the organism got louder. I could make out individual words now, pleas for help, screams of agony, some just weeping. I realized these were all the people who'd been transformed over the decades. Their consciousness somehow connected to this central hub. Ashley's transformation was further along. Her arms were already spreading wide, fingers extending into what would become branches. Her mouth moved, trying to speak, but woody bark was growing over her vocal cords. Dennis appeared behind me with Krantz and 2 other men. "This is what I was trying to explain, Mike. The organism needs fresh subjects to maintain genetic diversity in the crop. Your son and his girlfriend will make excellent timber. Young specimens produce the highest quality wood." Danny's legs had fused together and were stretching down into the earth like a taproot. His torso was hardening, skin becoming bark, but his face was still human, still my boy, and he was begging me with his eyes to help him. I picked up my chainsaw. "Smart choice," Dennis said, smiling. "Put them out of their misery now, or wait 6 months and harvest premium lumber. Either way, you're part of the operation. No one else would believe this. And even if they did, you're already an accessory." I pulled the starter cord and the stile roared to life. I looked down at Danny, watching his mouth move silently, trying to say please, as the bark crept up his neck toward his jaw. In that moment, I understood exactly how much I loved money more than my son. I turned off the saw and walked away. That was 3 years ago. I'm now the Pacific Northwest Regional Manager for Cascade Timber Solutions Specialty Wood Division. We operate 17 cultivation sites across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. I personally recruit new subjects from homeless encampments in Portland, addiction treatment centers in Eugene, and mental health facilities throughout the region. The profit margins are astronomical. We're expanding into international markets now. Demand for conscious timber is exploding among the ultra-wealthy who can afford furniture that responds to their emotional state, tables that weep when their owners are sad, chairs that warm when their users are cold. I tell myself these people had meaningless lives anyway. Street addicts, schizophrenics, illegal immigrants, they become the most valuable wood in the world, treasured by collectors who pay millions for a single piece. It's almost humanitarian when you think about it. Danny finished transforming into the most beautiful Douglas fir I've ever seen. His wood grain has this unique pattern that looks exactly like a young man's face when the light hits it right. The buyer in Manhattan said it was the most responsive timber he'd ever worked with. The dining table made from Danny's heartwood actually shows facial expressions, smiling when people gather around it, frowning when it's left alone. I kept one piece for myself. A small coffee table made from his lower trunk. Sometimes, late at night when Linda's asleep, I sit beside it and put my hands on its surface. I can feel Danny in there, still conscious, still my son. The wood is warm to the touch, and if I press my ear against it, I can hear him whispering. He's not begging for help anymore. After 3 years, he's learned to accept his situation. Mostly, he just tells me about his day, which birds landed on his branches, how the rain felt on his leaves, whether any hikers walked past his grove. He says Ashley is doing well too, though they can only talk when the wind is strong enough to make their branches touch. Sometimes he asks if I'm proud of him for being so valuable. I always tell him yes. The business is expanding faster than we can keep up with demand. We're going to need more subjects soon. Maybe start recruiting from college campuses, targeting students with debt problems or family financial troubles. Young people make the best timber, and there's never been a better time to be in the specialty wood business. Just last week, Danny asked if I could bring Linda to visit him. He misses his mother, and he'd love to meet his new sister-in-law when his brother gets married next month. I told him I'd think about it. The money's just too good to stop now. My name is Carmen Valdez, and I ran a food cart in Portland for 5 years before everything went to hell. Started Abuela's Kitchen in 2019 with my grandmother's recipes and a cart I bought off Craigslist for $3,000. Worked 18-hour days, slept in my Honda, saved every penny just to keep the health inspector happy and the propane flowing. I've served tech bros, construction workers, college kids, homeless folks counting quarters. Survived the ice storm of 2021 when my water lines froze solid. Worked through the pandemic when half the city shut down and food carts were dropping like flies. Made it through the protests, the supply chain disasters, everything. I thought running a food business in Portland was the hardest thing I'd ever do. Feed people honest food, make an honest living, maybe save enough to bring my kids up from California. But in March 2022, I discovered something about Oregon's agricultural industry that changed everything. Something that's been happening in the Willamette Valley for decades. Something that explains why certain restaurants and food carts have lines around the block, why people drive hours just to eat at specific places, and why so many missing person cases in rural Oregon never get solved. What I'm about to tell you is documented, recorded, but you'll never see it on the news. My cart sits in the Division Street pod, squeezed between Korean barbecue and artisanal donuts. Prime real estate, foot traffic from the apartments, office workers, close to the bars for late-night sales. The cart's 12 feet of cramped workspace, flat-top grill, 3-burner setup, prep counter that doubles as my office for paperwork. I work alone. Can't afford help, plus I like controlling every part of the process. Hand-cut carne asada, fresh salsa every morning, nothing sits under heat lamps longer than 2 hours. My regulars know the quality. Food costs nearly killed me after COVID. Beef prices doubled, pork wasn't far behind. I was sourcing from 2 local suppliers I'd worked with since day one, but margins were razor thin. Some weeks I chose between paying rent or restocking meat. That's when I got the letter. Came on official letterhead, Willamette Valley Agricultural Cooperative, professional, clean design. The letter explained they were a collective of small family farms offering premium organic meat products to select Portland food establishments. Prices 30% below market rate. References from 12 other carts and restaurants I recognized. I called the first reference. Tommy Chin, who runs the ramen cart on Alberta. Best supplier I've ever worked with, Tommy said. Quality's incredible, prices can't be beat. My customers literally fight each other to get in line. Same story from all 12 references. Incredible quality, unbeatable prices, customers who become absolutely devoted. The cooperative's representative, Miguel Herrera, visited the next Tuesday. Clean white truck, no company logo except small lettering with a phone number. Miguel looked professional, pressed shirt, clipboard, spoke perfect English with a slight accent. We're a network of 5 family farms in Marion County, he explained. Been operating for 20 years. But we only started direct sales after COVID hurt the restaurant supply chains. The meat samples were beautiful, perfect marbling, bright color, no off smells. When I test cooked a small batch, the flavor was unlike anything I'd tasted. Rich, complex, almost addictive. What makes it so different? I asked. Old world farming methods, Miguel smiled. Animals live natural lives, forage naturally, process their food differently than factory farms. Creates unique nutritional profiles. The prices were impossible to refuse. I placed my first order that day. Within a week, my sales tripled. Word spread through the food cart network like wildfire. By month 2, I had lines stretching around the block, customers coming back multiple times daily. Janet from the law office down the street started showing up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I should have questioned why the meat was so cheap, why customers became so devoted so quickly, but my bank account was finally in the black for the first time in 3 years. Then I found the first anomaly. It was a Tuesday morning, breaking down a pork shoulder for carnitas, when my knife hit something hard. Not bone, I know bone. This was smaller, denser, with sharp edges. I dug it out carefully. A human molar, complete with silver amalgam filling. The filling was fresh, recent dental work. I stared at it for a full minute, telling myself it had to be contamination from the processing plant. Workers get hurt, accidents happen. Gross, but not unheard of. I threw away that section of meat and called Miguel. Found something unusual in the pork, I said. Looks like a human tooth. Long pause. Can you describe it exactly? Molar with a silver filling? Definitely human. Ah, Miguel said, and I could hear him relaxing. That's not contamination, that's proof of quality. What? Our animals forage naturally in areas where previous animals lived. Sometimes they consume bone meal, old calcium deposits from the soil. What you found is calcified organic matter that's been processed through the animal's digestive system and integrated into the muscle tissue. It sounded scientific enough to be believable. That happens? Free-range animals living on historic farmland, absolutely. It actually increases the calcium and mineral content of the meat. Very healthy. 2 days later, breaking down beef chuck, I found a fingernail. Long, painted pink, embedded in the muscle like it had grown there. Called Miguel again, same explanation. Keratin deposits from the soil, processed through the animal's system. When I found the third thing, a section of human hair twisted through a pork tenderloin, like marbling, Miguel's explanation was ready. Protein fiber integration, sign of an animal living in a rich, organic environment. But Janet was coming by 4 times a day now. Marcus, the construction worker, had started eating only at my cart, told his wife my food was the only thing that tasted right anymore. Sarah, the college student, was losing weight but couldn't stop ordering extra portions. And late at night, when I was cleaning the grill, I sometimes heard what sounded like human voices coming from the meat itself. Whispers. Pleading. I told myself it was stress, long hours, imagination. But I started paying closer attention to my customers. The way their hands shook between visits. The desperate look in their eyes when I ran low on inventory. How they'd grown thin and pale, but couldn't stop eating. One evening, Marcus brought his whole family, wife, 2 kids. They have to try this, he said. They don't understand what they're missing. His 8-year-old son took 1 bite of carnitas and his eyes changed. That same hungry, desperate look I'd seen in all my regular customers. It's amazing, the kid whispered. When can we come back? Tomorrow, Marcus said. We'll come back tomorrow. That night, I decided to follow Miguel's truck on its next delivery. I closed early the next Friday and followed Miguel's truck east on Powell, then south through Milwaukee into farmland. After 40 minutes of rural roads, we turned onto a private drive marked only with a number, 47291. The property looked normal. Red barn, white farmhouse, fields of corn. But as I parked and crept closer on foot, I heard the sounds. Not animal sounds, human sounds. Crying, pleading, screaming. Through a crack in the barn wall, I saw rows of metal pens. But what was in those pens made me understand everything. They were people. Dozens of people. But they'd been modified. Some had pig snouts grafted where their noses should be. Others had cow udders hanging from their chests. Many had their limbs amputated and replaced with hooves or stumps. Their skin showed signs of surgical scarring, infection, crude medical procedures. But they were conscious, aware, talking. "Please," a woman with a pig snout begged when she saw me, "please call the police. I've been here 8 months." "She won't help," said a man whose legs had been replaced with cow legs. "They never help. The whole system's in on it." "I was a teacher," cried a woman whose arms had been amputated, replaced with crude prosthetic hooves. "I was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail when they took me." Miguel appeared behind me before I could process what I was seeing. "I hoped you wouldn't come here," he said sadly. "But smart business owners always investigate their supply chains." "What is this place?" "This is where your meat comes from, Carmen. These people volunteered to become livestock for the greater good." "Volunteered?" Miguel led me to a smaller building filled with filing cabinets. "We've been operating since 1987, started by a group of farmers whose land was being bought up by developers. They discovered that certain people, homeless, addicts, missing hikers, runaway teens, could be convinced to sign contracts donating their bodies to agricultural research." He pulled out a thick folder of legal documents, all completely legal. They sign consent forms, waive all rights, become property of the cooperative. We keep them alive as long as possible, harvest what we can, and process the rest when they expire. The documents looked official. Notarized signatures, legal language, state agriculture department stamps. "The meat quality is superior because they're fresh," Miguel continued. "We don't slaughter them all at once. We harvest sections while they're alive, keeps the meat tender, and prevents decomposition." I looked back toward the barn where people were screaming. "This is insane. This feeds half of Oregon, Carmen. Portland alone has 60 restaurants and food carts using our products. Eugene, Salem, Bend, we supply the entire Willamette Valley. The state government knows exactly what we do." "That's impossible." Miguel pulled out his phone and showed me photos. Governor Kate Brown eating at a restaurant I recognized. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler at a food cart that used cooperative meat. Police Chief Chuck Lovell at another supplier. "They all know," Miguel said. "They all eat it. And once you've been consuming human meat regularly for a few months, your brain chemistry changes. You can't stop. Won't stop. The addiction is neurological." How many people know? How many people know? Everyone who matters. Judges, prosecutors, police chiefs, health inspectors. They're all addicted. The whole system protects itself because the whole system needs the product. He showed me shipping manifests. Over 200 restaurants and food carts across Oregon. Thousands of regular consumers. A distribution network that reached into Seattle, Sacramento, and beyond. "Your customers are already addicted," Miguel said. "Stop serving our meat now, they'll go through withdrawal. It's not pretty. Some get violent." That afternoon, I tried serving regular beef from my old supplier. By noon, I had an angry mob outside my cart. Janet was screaming about false advertising, threatening to call the health department. Marcus tried to climb through my service window. Someone threw a rock that cracked my windshield. I called Miguel and begged for an emergency delivery. But the real horror started 3 days later, when Miguel made me an offer I couldn't refuse. "We need to expand our supply chain," Miguel said, visiting my cart after closing time. "Looking for healthy specimens between 18 and 35. Good genetics, minimal health issues. I'm not kidnapping people for you. Not kidnapping. Recruiting. We need someone with connections to the customer base to identify ideal candidates." "Absolutely not." Miguel pulled out a manila envelope and handed me photos. My daughter Sophia walking out of her elementary school in San Jose. Sophia playing at a park near my sister's house. Sophia sleeping in her bed. "She's perfect," Miguel said. 8 years old, healthy, good bone structure. Young enough to adapt to the modification process. My hands shook, holding the photos. "You stay away from my family. We already have a team in California," Miguel continued. "Your sister Maria works at the Walmart on Story Road. Your ex-husband David coaches Little League at Watson Park. We know their schedules, their routines. What do you want? Help us recruit volunteers from your customer base, people who won't be missed immediately. In exchange, your family stays safe. And if I refuse?" Miguel showed me a video on his phone. Sophia walking home from school, followed by a man I didn't recognize. "We can take her today, or you can help us find other sources. Your choice. How many people do you need? 15 by the end of the month. Focus on your most addicted customers. They're already neurologically compromised. Easier to convince they're making a noble sacrifice. I looked at my customer list. Janet, who'd lost 30 pounds but couldn't stop eating at my cart. Marcus, who'd started stealing from his construction job to pay for extra meals. Sarah, who dropped out of Portland State because she couldn't focus on anything except getting her next fix. They trust you, Miguel said. They'll believe you when you tell them about our special program for devoted customers. That night I called my sister, Maria. You need to take Sophia somewhere safe. Don't tell me where. Just go. Carmen, what's wrong? I can't explain. Just trust me. Take Sophia and disappear for a while. But the next morning, Miguel was waiting at my cart with fresh photos, Sophia and Maria at a gas station in Fresno. We have people everywhere, he said. California, Washington, Nevada. You can't hide them from us. What exactly are you asking me to do? Miguel handed me business cards for something called the Willamette Valley Wellness Retreat. Professional design, medical-looking logo. Tell your most devoted customers about our exclusive program. People who are struggling with food addiction, health issues, financial problems. We offer a solution. What kind of solution? Complete transformation. They sign a contract, donate their bodies to agricultural research, and we take care of all their problems permanently. I stared at the cards. You want me to convince people to become livestock? I want you to help troubled people find peace, Miguel corrected, and keep your daughter safe. I had 24 hours to decide. I made my choice the next morning. I started with Janet. She was already spending her entire paycheck at my cart, looked skeletal, couldn't hold down any other food. Janet, I said during her third visit that day, I want to tell you about something special. A program that might help with your situation. Her eyes lit up with desperate hope. What kind of program? It's a wellness retreat in the valley. They specialize in people who've developed intense food relationships. They can help you break the cycle. I handed her Miguel's card. Just tell them Carmen sent you. Janet drove out to the farm that Friday. Miguel called me Monday morning. Excellent choice. She signed all the paperwork enthusiastically. Said she was tired of fighting the hunger. Over the next month, I recruited 14 more people. Marcus, who'd been stealing to pay for food. Sarah, who'd become so thin, her parents were planning an intervention. A dozen others who'd reached the point where our meat was the only thing keeping them functional. All of them went willingly. All of them signed the contracts Miguel showed me later. Legal documents donating their bodies to agricultural research. Waiving all rights, essentially signing away their humanity. They're happier now, Miguel assured me. No more struggling with addiction, no more financial stress. They serve a greater purpose. But I hear them sometimes when Miguel delivers my meat, voices in the packages, whispers from the coolers. Janet's voice asking why I sent her there. Marcus crying that he just wanted help. That was 18 months ago. I now run 12 food carts across Oregon, all supplied by the Willamette Valley Agricultural Cooperative. The addiction has spread to over 300,000 people throughout the Pacific Northwest. State officials know exactly what they're eating, but they can't stop themselves anymore. My sister and Sophia disappeared into witness protection with help from one federal agent who hadn't been compromised yet. I get letters sometimes, but I don't know where they are. It's safer that way. The cooperative sends me a monthly quota now. 20 new specimens minimum, or they expand their California operations to include my extended family. I've become very good at identifying potential volunteers among my customers, people who are isolated, desperate, or just unlucky enough to develop particularly strong addictions. Last week, I recruited a family of 4. Tourists from Texas who'd become obsessed with Portland's food scene, spent their entire vacation budget eating at my various locations, maxed out credit cards. We're talking about moving here permanently just for the food. I told them about the retreat, how it would solve all their problems. They thanked me as they loaded their kids into their minivan for the drive to Marion County. The cooperative is expanding nationwide now. Food trucks in Seattle, restaurants in Sacramento, catering services in Los Angeles. They've perfected the recruitment process, streamlined the legal documentation, and corrupted officials in 6 states. Oregon's agricultural industry has never been more profitable. We're shipping specialty organic meat products as far as Chicago and Atlanta. The governor just announced new subsidies for innovative farming techniques. If you ever visit Oregon, try the local cuisine. People say it's the best they've ever tasted. Just remember, The missing person statistics for Oregon are among the highest in the nation. Hikers disappear on popular trails. Homeless camps empty out overnight. College students drop out of school and vanish. And our food scene keeps getting better and better.